My wife hid that she can't have kids, and I just found out after 6 years together. When I met Claire, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. She was the kind of woman who carried peace with her. Gentle voice, steady eyes, and that soft way of smiling that made you feel seen. We met at a local bookstore in Portland, both reaching for the same worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. I joked about fate. She laughed, and somehow that night turned into dinner, then coffee the next morning. Then an entire 6 years of building a life together. From the start, Claire and I talked about family. She always said she wanted kids someday, but she liked the idea of waiting, saving up, traveling, making sure we were ready. I respected that. I didn't want to rush her. We were still young, and I figured we had time. About 2 years into our relationship, I proposed. She cried before she even said yes. The wedding was small, just close friends and family. My mom cried when Claire walked down the aisle, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is the life I want. We bought a little blue house outside the city. We adopted a dog, Daisy. Life was good. Claire worked as a nurse, and I was a mechanic. We didn't have much, but it felt like enough. Every year I'd bring up the idea of kids. Just gently, she'd smile and say, someday soon. But someday never came. Around year 5, I started to wonder if something was wrong. It wasn't even pressure. I just wanted to plan. We were stable, had good jobs, and most of our friends were having kids. I thought maybe she was just nervous, but whenever I brought it up, she'd either change the subject or suddenly pick a fight. A few months ago, something shifted. She started acting distant, coming home late, sitting in the dark, staring at her phone. I thought maybe she was depressed, or maybe even cheating. I didn't want to believe that. But her behavior scared me. One night, I came home early from work. She didn't hear me come in, and I saw her sitting on the couch crying, holding a piece of paper. When I asked her what was wrong, she froze like a deer in headlights. I sat next to her and took the paper out of her hand before she could hide it. It was a medical report. I'll never forget the words. Permanent infertility due to bilateral oophorectomy. I stared at it, not even understanding at first. I asked her what it meant. Her face crumpled. She whispered, "It means I can't have children." I never could. I don't even remember what I said. My brain just stopped. She explained that she'd had her ovaries removed when she was 18 because of severe ovarian tumors. She was told she'd never be able to have biological kids. She said she thought no one would ever want her if they knew. She was terrified I'd leave her if she told me. So she never did, for 6 years. Dating, engagement, marriage. She kept that secret. Every conversation about kids, every maybe next year, every promise, was a lie. I just sat there in silence. I wasn't even angry at first. I was just stunned. Then the anger came like a wave. 6 years. 6 years of building a dream around a future that could never exist. She begged me to understand. She said she always wanted to tell me, but the longer we were together, the harder it became. She thought maybe I'd stop wanting kids, or that love would be enough. She said she planned to tell me before we started trying, but she never found the courage. I slept on the couch that night. For the next few days, I couldn't even look at her. The thing is, I still love her. I love her more than anyone I've ever loved. But every time I see her now, I remember how easily she looked me in the eyes for years and lied. We talked again after a week. She told me she wanted to look into adoption, that we could still have a family. She promised me this time there'd be no more secrets. But I didn't know if I could trust her again. My mom found out, Claire told her, hoping she'd convince me to stay. My mom tried, but even she said, "She should have told you, son." My dad was blunter. "She took away your choice, and that's what it feels like. Like a choice was stolen from me. The past month has been strange. We live in the same house, but move like ghosts. She still cooks for me, still says goodnight, still tries to reach for my hand. Sometimes I let her, sometimes I pull away. I started therapy last week. The counselor told me trust can be rebuilt, but only if both people are willing to face the full truth. Claire wants to go to couples therapy, and I agreed. But I told her one thing. I won't promise her forever again. Not yet. There's a part of me that understands her fear. I can't imagine being 18, told I'll never have kids, and thinking no one will love me after that. But another part of me, the part that's still raw, can't stop replaying every lie. We've built so much together, but it feels like the foundation cracked, and I don't know if we can rebuild it. A few nights ago, I found her sitting in the backyard, crying under the porch light. She looks so small, she said. "If you need to leave me, I'll understand." I sat next to her, and we didn't speak for a long time. I finally said, I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I'm not going to decide out of anger. That's where we are now, somewhere between love and betrayal, hope and heartbreak. I still look at her and see the woman I married, the woman who makes the best blueberry pancakes, who dances in the kitchen with Daisy, who once made me feel like the luckiest man alive. But I also see the woman who lied to me every day for 6 years. And I don't know which version of her I'm married to anymore. Update. It's been 3 months since I wrote that post, and my life feels like it's been split into before and after. Before I knew the truth, everything was stable, predictable, soft around the edges. After, it's like the world's gone grayscale. The colors are still there, but they're muted. A week after my last post, Claire and I started couples therapy. I didn't expect much, honestly. I went in with my arms crossed, ready to prove to the therapist that I was the wronged one, that Claire had broken something sacred. But that first session cracked something in me instead. The therapist, a middle-aged woman named Denise, asked us to describe our relationship without mentioning the infertility or the lie. It was harder than I thought. I said things like, "We laugh a lot, and she's my best friend," Claire said. "He makes me feel safe. And he's the only person who ever made me believe I deserved love." That last part hit me. Deserved love, because the truth is, Claire's fear wasn't rooted in selfishness. It was in shame. She told Denise about how her high school boyfriend dumped her after finding out she couldn't have kids, how she overheard her own mother crying to an aunt saying, she'll never give a man a family. So when she met me, she built a wall around that part of her. She convinced herself that if she just loved me enough, maybe the lie would fade, or maybe I'd change my mind about wanting kids. But lies don't fade, they fester. We kept going to therapy every week. Some sessions ended with us hugging, others with me storming out, but slowly. We started talking again, really talking. One night after a session, I came home late and found Claire sitting at the dining table surrounded by paperwork. It was adoption info. She'd been researching every possible route, domestic, foster to adopt, even embryo adoption. She said, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to show you that we can still build something together." I didn't say anything at first. Then I sat down next to her and started reading. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like we were on opposite sides. Still, trust doesn't just regenerate because you want it to. It has to be rebuilt from splinters. And mine still had a lot of sharp edges. About a month ago, I took a solo trip to visit my brother Matt in Colorado. I needed space to think without the weight of Claire's eyes on me. Matt's the type who calls things as he sees them. Over beers one night, he said, "Look, man, she screwed up big time. But it doesn't sound like she lied to hurt you. She lied because she was scared. So you have to ask yourself if fear is unforgivable." That stuck with me. Fear is human. Deception is wrong. But fear makes people do desperate things. When I got back home, I walked in to find the living room redecorated. Nothing crazy, just brighter, lighter. She said she wanted the space to feel hopeful. It sounds silly, but it did something to me. We had a long talk that night, probably the most honest one we've ever had. I told her that while I loved her, I needed to mourn the version of our marriage I thought we had. The one built on total honesty and the dream of having biological kids. That dream is gone. I had to grieve it like a loss. She cried, and so did I. We decided to separate for a bit. Not a breakup, just space. I moved in with a friend for a couple of weeks. We still went to therapy together, still texted every day, but we stopped pretending everything was fine. We let ourselves be broken. Then one night she texted me a picture. It was Daisy, our dog, sleeping with one of my old hoodies in her bed. Her message just said, "She misses you, I do too." Something in me shifted again. I went home the next day. Not because everything was fixed, but because I realized I didn't want to start over with someone else. I didn't want to rebuild from scratch with a new person. I wanted to rebuild this, with all its scars and cracks. We're still figuring it out. Some days are good. We laugh, we cook dinner together. We even went hiking last weekend other days. I wake up, and the first thought in my head is, she lied to me for 6 years. But therapy's helping. So is honesty. Real, brutal honesty. I told her once, if we ever adopt, I need to know we're doing it because we both want to, not because you're trying to make it up to me. She nodded and said, "Then let's heal first and decide later." That's what we're doing now. Healing first. A few days ago, we were lying on the couch, watching some dumb reality show, and she said quietly, "I used to think I'd ruined your life." I looked at her and said, "You didn't ruin it. You changed it. And I'm still deciding what that means. There's still a long road ahead. I don't know if we'll make it to the finish line, whatever that even is. But for the first time since finding out the truth, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just human again. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that love doesn't always look like the fairy tale we imagine. Sometimes it's choosing to stay and rebuild, brick by shaky brick. Sometimes it's letting go. I'm not sure which one this is yet, but I'm trying to find out. Final update. It's been just over a year since I found out the truth about Claire. And if you told me back then that we'd still be together now, stronger, calmer, more real, I would have laughed in your face. I thought that secret had killed us. In some ways it did. But what came after wasn't the same marriage rebuilt. It was a new one born from the ashes of the old. When I wrote that last update, Claire and I were still balancing between hope and hesitation. Things were tentative. We talked carefully, touched carefully, even laughed carefully like two people afraid to break something fragile. But slowly, those edges softened. Therapy helped, sure, but what helped most was time. Time spent living our lives again, doing small things that reminded us who we were before the lies and tears and late-night fights. We planted a small garden in the spring, tomatoes, peppers, and one stubborn row of sunflowers that never quite stood straight. On weekends, we'd take Daisy to the dog park, grab lunch at this little diner near the highway, and drive with no destination in mind. Sometimes we'd end up at the lake, sitting in silence. Other times, we'd talk for hours about everything, our childhoods, our fears, the future. Those conversations started bringing me back to her. Not the Claire who lied, but the Claire who laughed at my bad jokes, who left sticky notes on my toolbox that said, "You're amazing," who danced barefoot in the kitchen at midnight. But rebuilding trust wasn't a straight line. There were bad days. Some were triggered by nothing. A song on the radio, a friend posting baby pictures, an offhand comment from a coworker. I'd feel that old resentment rise up, that sting of what we lost. One night, I came home from work and saw her watching a documentary about adoption. My chest tightened like it was the first day all over again. I snapped at her, told her to stop trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. She didn't yell back. She just turned off the TV, sat beside me and said, "I'm not trying to fix it. I'm trying to understand it." And for the first time, I realized she wasn't the only one trying to make peace with what happened. I was too. Around midsummer, we decided to take a break from therapy, not because we were done healing, but because we felt ready to handle life on our own. We started going on morning walks together before work, something we used to do when we were dating. No heavy talks, no analyzing, just the sound of our shoes on the sidewalk, the world waking up around us, and sometimes her hand brushing mine. In August, something unexpected happened. Claire got a call from her cousin, who had just given birth to a baby boy. The cousin wasn't in a stable place. Young, struggling with addiction, not ready to raise a child. She asked if we'd consider taking temporary custody while she got her life together. The timing felt cruel at first, like the universe was testing us. But we said yes. His name was Lucas. He was 6 weeks old when he came to live with us. And I'll be honest, I was terrified. I didn't know if I was ready to love a child that wasn't mine. Not after everything, but the first time I held him. Something cracked open inside me. He was small, warm, completely unaware of the chaos that had led him into our lives. He just looked at me, eyes wide, like I was someone worth trusting. And in that moment, I understood something I'd been fighting for months. Biology doesn't define love. Choice does. We kept him for 4 months during that time. I saw a version of Claire I'd never seen before. The way she held him, talked to him, sang off-key lullabies just to make him laugh. It was like watching her heart heal in real time. When her cousin eventually got clean and took Lucas back, we cried for days. The house felt unbearably quiet. But that experience changed everything. It didn't fill the void. It transformed it. We started talking seriously about adoption, not as a way to replace something lost, but as a way to expand what we already had. We've begun the process now. It's long, complicated, and expensive, but we're in it together. We're taking our time, making sure every step is right. For once, there's no secrecy, no rushing, no pretending, just us, moving forward honestly. Looking back, I realized that Claire's lie wasn't the end of our marriage. It was the end of our illusion. We'd built our love on the idea that honesty means perfection. That truth means never making mistakes. But real truth? It's messy. It's choosing to stay when the easy thing is to go. It's forgiving, even when the hurt still lingers. I won't pretend everything's perfect now. Some wounds don't close completely, but they stop bleeding. They become scars. Marks that remind you of both the pain and the survival. Last week we renewed our vows. Not in a church, not in front of a crowd, just the two of us in our backyard. The sunflowers tall and crooked behind us. She wrote hers by hand, and she started with, "This time, I promise you the truth," and I said, "This time, I promise you forgiveness, if I've learned anything. It's that love isn't about never being broken. It's about who's willing to sit with you in the pieces and build something new." Claire did that for me, and now I'm doing it for her. We're still here, still us, different, but whole in a new way. Stories number 2. My brother's signed John Cena poster got destroyed at the party. So my best friend Caleb and I are both 17, juniors in high school, and share a deep appreciation for two things: wrestling and terrible decisions. This story happened a few months ago, during what I now refer to as the weekend that ruined my life. It started when my parents told me they were taking my little brother Mason to some regional baseball tournament 2 states away. My dad coaches Mason's little league team, and my mom's the type who never misses a game. They'd be gone from Friday night through late Sunday. My sister Riley, she's 10 and has this permanent, "I'm better than you" attitude, went along too. That left me home alone for 2 nights. At least, that was the plan. Caleb's parents were also going to be out of town for a wedding, so it didn't take long for one of us to say the word party. It was me, I'll admit it. We didn't want to throw something massive, just a hangout with a few friends. Some music, pizza, and maybe a couple of 6-packs that Caleb's older cousin, Ethan, could get us. But like every teen party in history, it got out of hand fast by 9:30 that Friday night. My house was packed, I'm talking 30, maybe 40 people. Loud music, the smell of cheap beer, and someone trying to make a TikTok dance video in the kitchen. I remember thinking it was kind of fun, in that chaotic, "I'll deal with this tomorrow" sort of way. At one point, Caleb shouted from the living room, "Dude!" Someone just knocked over the lamp. I rushed in, only to see my dad's old floor lamp in pieces on the carpet. That should have been my first warning to shut it all down. Instead, I grabbed some duct tape, tried to fix it, and told myself I'll handle it later now. The real problem, the John Cena poster. My brother Mason is 8, and he's obsessed with WWE. Last year, my parents surprised him with a signed John Cena poster for his birthday. It wasn't just any print, either. It had Cena's signature in bold silver marker and a certificate of authenticity framed beside it. Mason treated it like a holy relic. He'd tell everyone who came over, "That's real, you know. John Cena actually touched it." My mom made me promise, that nothing would ever happen to it. The thing was framed, sealed, and hung on the wall of our family den around 11 p.m. I noticed a group of guys from another school, kids I didn't even know, laughing and messing around in that room. One of them, a tall dude in a sleeveless hoodie named Trent, was flexing and pretending to do wrestling moves. I went in to tell them to knock it off, and that's when I saw it. The frame was shattered. At first, I thought it was just the glass, but when I picked it up, I realized the poster itself had been torn right across John Cena's chest. The signature was ruined. My heart sank. I could hear my mom's voice in my head clear as day. "You can't be responsible for nice things, can you?" I shouted at everyone to leave. The party ended fast, people scrambling for their shoes, Caleb trying to calm me down, someone knocking over a bag of chips on their way out. By midnight, it was just me and Caleb standing in a wrecked living room. We spent the next 3 hours cleaning everything. The lamp was taped together, the carpet was sticky, and the John Cena poster sat on the counter like a corpse. The next morning, I called Caleb over again, and we tried to figure out how to fix it. We even searched online for how to repair torn poster, but the tear went through the signature. There was no saving it. We looked on eBay for replacements. Nothing close. When my parents came home Sunday night, the house looked normal enough, until Mason walked into the den. He froze. Then he screamed, "What happened to John Cena?" My mom and dad rushed in, and I swear, I could see the exact second my dad realized it wasn't an accident. "What did you do?" he asked, voice low, calm in that terrifying way. I tried to explain. I said it got crowded, that I didn't mean for anyone to touch it, that I'd clean everything and pay for it somehow. My mom didn't say a word, just walked out of the room. Mason started crying, like full-on sobbing. He kept saying, "He's gone. He's gone. like John Cena had actually died. My parents grounded me for 3 months. No car, no phone, no friends over. They also made me take money from my summer job savings to order a replacement, an unsigned one. Mason hung it up anyway, but he wouldn't talk to me for weeks. Caleb tried to take some blame, but my parents said, "It wasn't his house, it was yours." The thing that still eats at me is how Mason looks at me when he talks about wrestling now. He'll mention something about Cena, and then just pause, like remembering the night his hero got ripped in half because of his stupid older brother. And yeah, I deserved the grounding. But man, if I could go back in time, I'd cancel that party so fast, because the silence in that house the next morning, way worse than any hangover. Update. It's been about 3 months since the Great Cena disaster, and things have finally started to calm down at home. Kind of. I figured I'd update since a few people, well, mostly friends who read this story when I ranted about it on a different platform, first asked what happened after the grounding, and whether Mason ever forgave me. The answer is, it's complicated. For the first month, my parents were dead serious about the punishment. I wasn't allowed to hang out with Caleb, my phone was confiscated, and I had to come straight home from school every day. My dad even told my boss at the diner where I work part-time that I'd be unavailable for shifts until further notice. That one hurt. I actually liked that job. The weirdest part was how quiet the house felt. My mom didn't yell after that first night. She just looked disappointed all the time. My dad, usually the jokester, barely talked to me unless it was about chores. I'd try to bring up random stuff at dinner, like asking about Mason's baseball games. But nobody really responded. It was like I'd turned into background noise. Mason wouldn't even sit next to me. He'd grab his plate and eat in the living room, sometimes right under the new unsigned John Cena poster. Every time I passed by, it was like the poster was staring at me too. John Cena, Judgmental Ghost Edition. About a month into my grounding, I tried to make things right. I took extra shifts at the diner once my dad let me start working again. I put aside every tip I got and started searching online again for another signed Cena poster. Most of them were expensive, like $400, $700, which might as well have been $1 million to me. But I kept looking every night, even during study hall at school. Then one day, Caleb texted me something wild. His cousin Ethan, the same guy who'd bought us the beer for the party, had a friend who worked security for a sports memorabilia store in Nashville. They were doing a charity signing event with actual wrestlers later that month, and apparently, Cena himself was one of them. I don't think I've ever moved faster in my life. I begged my parents to let me go. My dad's first response was a flat, no. But after I showed him my savings, explained that I'd pay for everything myself, and told him this was my way of fixing what I broke, he actually paused. My mom said, "If you're serious about this, then prove it." So I did. I kept working, picked up 2 extra weekend shifts, and saved every cent. The day of the event, Caleb and I left at dawn in his beat-up Ford. It was a 4-hour drive, and we were both running on Red Bulls and bad fast food. But I didn't care. When we finally got to the store, there was already a massive line outside. I remember holding that unsigned replacement poster in my hands, hoping I could somehow make it right. And somehow, it worked. I met John Cena. I can still barely believe it. The guy was actually super nice. When I told him what had happened, he laughed. Not a mocking laugh, more like a classic teenage screw-up kind of thing. He even said, "Hey, sounds like your brother's a real champ. Let's fix that." He signed the poster again, in the same silver marker, right across the same spot that had been torn. He even wrote, "Never give up, Mason." Underneath it, I nearly cried. When I got home that night, I waited until Mason came back from practice. He looked suspicious when I called him into the den, like I was about to prank him. Then I showed him the new signed poster. His jaw literally dropped. "No way," he whispered, tracing the signature with his finger. "That's real?" "Yeah," I said. "Cena himself signed it, for you." He didn't say anything for a while. Then he just hugged me. It was one of those awkward, stiff kid hugs at first. But then he squeezed tighter, and suddenly it hit me how much guilt I'd been carrying for months. He kept saying, Thanks. 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 Over and over again. My parents came in a few minutes later, probably because Mason screamed for them. And when my dad saw it, he smiled for the first time in months. My mom even teared up a little. Since then, things have actually gotten better. I'm ungrounded back at work, and Mason and I even watch wrestling together again. Every time Cena comes on TV, he yells, "That's my guy." The new poster is now in Mason's room instead of the den. I told him that's probably safer anyway. Caleb jokes that I basically went on a redemption arc straight out of a Disney movie, but honestly, I needed it. That whole mess taught me more about responsibility and trust than any lecture ever could. And yeah, I still cringe when I think about that night. The loud music, the strangers, the broken frame. But now there's this sense of closure. Mason's happy again. My parents trust me again. And somewhere out there, John Cena unknowingly saved my relationship with my family. I guess that's what they mean when they say never give up. Update 2. So it's been about 7 months since I posted that last update, the one where I met John Cena and gave Mason the new signed poster. And honestly, I thought that would be the end of this whole saga. But life has this weird way of keeping old stories alive when you least expect it. A lot has changed since then. I'm a senior now. Caleb and I both turned 18. And my parents have finally started treating me like someone they trust again. Mason's still obsessed with wrestling that will never change. But now, instead of looking at me like I'm the guy who destroyed his hero, he actually looks up to me again. We hang out more than I ever thought brothers with a 10-year age gap would. But this update isn't just about some happy ending. It's about what happened when the past decided to crash back into the present. It started about 2 months ago when Caleb texted me a link to a local community Facebook post. Someone had uploaded pictures from that party we threw. The one that started all this. A bunch of blurry shots, red cups, people dancing. And yes, one clear picture of the den. Right before the poster got torn, you could even see Trent the sleeveless hoodie guy doing some fake wrestling pose in front of it. The caption said something like, "Crazy night at Jake's house last year." Jake, that's me. I felt my stomach drop. Apparently, someone who'd been there, probably one of those randoms who showed up because of Caleb's cousin's friend, decided to post the photos for nostalgia or clout or whatever. The problem was, my dad saw it. He's not on Facebook much, but my aunt tagged him in it because she thought it was funny. She didn't realize the backstory, of course. The next morning, I came downstairs to find my dad sitting at the kitchen table with his phone on the counter. He just looked at me and said, "Want to explain why 40 people were in my house while we were gone?" It felt like getting punched all over again. I told him the truth, again, that we'd already talked about it, that he knew about the party, and that I'd taken responsibility for everything. But he said, seeing it is different than hearing it. I could tell he wasn't angry in the same way as before. More like disappointed all over again. He eventually let it go. But it reopened this old tension in the house. For a few weeks, it felt like everyone was walking on eggshells again. My mom even joked kind of that maybe I should go work for an event cleanup crew since I'd had so much practice. But the real shock came from Mason. A few nights later, I was helping him set up his wrestling action figures when he asked, "Was that the night the poster broke?" I said yeah. He was quiet for a bit, then said, "Did you ever find out who ripped it?" I hadn't. Not officially. I always suspected it was Trent or one of his buddies, but I never got a clear answer. So Mason, being the little detective he is, decided he was going to find out. I didn't think he was serious. But a week later, he came running into my room with his iPad. He'd gone through that Facebook post, clicked on the people who liked or commented on it, and somehow found Trent's Instagram. And guess what? Trent had posted a video from that same night, with audio. It wasn't long, but in the background, you can clearly hear someone yelling, "Yo, check this out!" Followed by the sound of glass breaking, and someone laughing, "Bro, you killed Cena." Then Trent turns the camera to show the torn poster. He's laughing, holding a beer, saying, "Cena didn't see that one coming." I just sat there in disbelief. Mason's face was red, like he was furious and about to cry at the same time. He said, "That's the guy, isn't it? The one who ruined it." I nodded. For a minute I thought about letting it go. What was the point? It had been almost a year, But then Mason said something that changed my mind. He didn't even care. He laughed. You tried to fix it. But he didn't. That hit hard because yeah, I messed up throwing the party, but Trent was the reason my brother's hero got ripped apart in the first place. So I messaged him. I wasn't trying to start a fight. I just told him who I was, that the poster had meant a lot to my brother, and that I'd seen his video. I said, you don't have to apologize to me, but maybe think about what you wrecked. He didn't reply for a week. Then, out of nowhere, he sent a short message. Didn't know it was signed, my bad. That was it. No emotion, no accountability. But a few days later, something wild happened. A package showed up at my house addressed to me. Inside was a WWE replica belt and a note that said, for Mason? From a guy who used to be an idiot. There was no name, but it didn't take a genius to figure out who sent it. I gave it to Mason that night. His eyes went huge. For me? He asked. Yeah, I said. From someone who wanted to make things right. He ran around the house wearing that belt for the rest of the night, doing Cena's "you can't see me" pose at the dog, and that's when it hit me. This whole mess, every broken thing, every punishment, every awkward dinner had come full circle. Trent made a mistake, I made a mistake, but somehow, out of all that chaos, Mason got something even better. A story that ended with his hero's signature, a replica belt, and two older guys who finally learned how to own up to what they did. Caleb calls it the Cena Redemption Arc Part 2. Honestly, I can't argue with that because now, when Mason and I watch wrestling and Cena comes out, he doesn't just cheer for the guy in the ring. He looks at me and grins like we're both part of the story now. And that feels like a win. Stories number 3. My husband refuses to retire even though our adult kids still rely on us. I'm 58, my husband is 61, and we've both been working full-time since our 20s. We raised 3 kids, 2 sons and a daughter, who are all grown, but somehow, we're still footing the bill for parts of their lives. My husband, Mark, says he won't retire until everyone gets on their feet. The problem is, that might never happen. We live in Ohio, in a modest but comfortable house we bought in the early 2000s. We've both done well for ourselves. Mark works as an electrical engineer, and I've been a school counselor for decades. We have a healthy retirement fund, no major debt, and a clear plan to finally travel, slow down, and enjoy life. But every time we start talking about setting a date for Mark to retire, something, or someone, keeps him from committing. Our oldest Ryan is 32, he's been through a rough few years. He went through a divorce 2 years ago, and he's been trying to get back on his feet. He has a decent job in logistics, but he still lives in the condo we bought years ago, temporarily. We don't charge him rent, and Mark still helps him with repairs and taxes. Then there's Emma, 28, who's in grad school getting her master's in social work. We pay for her car insurance and her phone bill because, as Mark says, she's doing something meaningful and can't focus on money right now. Our youngest, Tyler, is 24, and he's been floating around odd jobs while trying to find his passion. Translation. We've been helping him with rent for over a year. I love our kids, but at some point, they need to take responsibility. I feel like Mark's guilt as a dad keeps him trapped. He had a rough upbringing. His dad left when he was 10, and his mom worked 2 jobs, so he swore he'd always be there for his kids. But what that's turned into is him being unable to let them face hard things. Every time I bring up retirement, he finds another reason to delay. We'd planned for him to retire this past spring. I had everything lined up. Our finances, our travel list, even a small ceremony at his job. But when Ryan's car broke down, Mark took it as a sign. He said, I can't stop working when the kids still need me. He ended up buying Ryan a used car. When I protested, he got defensive and said, he's trying, and I'm not going to abandon him. I told him, helping our adult children isn't the same as abandoning them. He just shook his head and muttered, you wouldn't understand. They still need us. It's not just about money, it's about his mindset. He doesn't know how to stop being the provider. It's like his identity depends on being needed. I've seen him come home exhausted, rubbing his temples. But when I suggest he take a break, he insists he's fine. He says, work gives me purpose. But I can tell he's burned out. His patience is shorter. He sleeps less. And he barely touches his hobbies anymore. Last month, I brought up retiring again. I said, Mark, we can't keep putting this off. We're not getting younger. He didn't even look up from his computer. He just said, I can't retire when the kids still need us financially. I reminded him that they'll always need something. He sighed and said, maybe I'll reconsider next year. That was the same thing he said last year. and the year before that. Things came to a head 2 weeks ago. We were having dinner with Ryan and Emma, and I casually mentioned that I was planning to visit my sister in Florida next month. Mark said he couldn't go because he had too much work. Emma said, "You guys aren't thinking of retiring soon, right? Because I'll still need help with tuition," Ryan added. "And if something happens with the condo, I'll need you to look at it." I just stared at them. Mark smiled and said, "Don't worry, we're not going anywhere." I snapped. I said, "Actually, I'm thinking of retiring soon. And your dad should too, you're all adults. You need to start planning for yourselves." The table went silent. After dinner, Mark was furious. He said I embarrassed him and made the kids feel abandoned. I told him I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I just wanted them to understand that we're not an endless safety net. He said, "They're family. Family helps each other." I said, "Family also learns to stand on their own." He didn't respond. Since then, we've barely talked about it. He's been distant, spending more time in his garage tinkering with projects. I feel like I'm watching our retirement slip away while he clings to a role he doesn't know how to let go of. I keep thinking about what happens if his health starts to fail. Or if something happens to one of us, what then? The kids won't know how to cope financially or emotionally, because he's never given them the space to. I don't resent our kids, but I do resent that Mark and I are stuck in this loop. We've done our job, we raised good, kind adults, but I'm tired of being their financial cushion. I want us to live the life we planned for before it's too late. I just don't know how to make him see that retiring isn't abandoning them. It's finally choosing us. If I'm being honest, part of me wonders if he's just afraid of stopping. Maybe retirement feels like the end for him, and helping the kids keeps him from facing that. But I can't keep waiting for him to be ready while the years pass us by. I've already decided that I'll retire at the end of this year. Whether Mark joins me or not is up to him. Update. It's been about 5 months since I first wrote that. And a lot has changed. Some of it for the better, some not so much. After I posted, I retired at the end of the school year like I'd planned. I didn't make a big deal of it. Just a small gathering with a few coworkers. Mark didn't come. He said he couldn't get off work because they were in the middle of a big project. I knew that wasn't the real reason, but I let it go. The first few weeks of retirement felt strange. I'd wake up early out of habit, pour coffee, and sit there wondering what to do. It took me a while to shake the feeling that I was skipping class, but eventually I settled into a routine. Morning walks, helping out at the library, calling friends I hadn't talked to in years. I even started planning a trip to visit my sister in Florida again. Something I'd put off too long. Mark, though, has been complicated at first. He acted like my retirement didn't bother him. He congratulated me, said I deserved it, but I could feel the distance growing. He started staying late at work more often. Sometimes he'd come home after I was already in bed. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd say, "Yeah, just tired." Then, about 2 months ago, Ryan lost his job. His company downsized, and he was one of the people let go. The same day he told us, Mark's face changed completely. It was like every argument we'd ever had disappeared from his mind. He immediately said, "Don't worry, we'll figure it out." I said, "Mark, we can't just keep bailing him out." But he'd already offered to cover Ryan's mortgage. For a little while. That night, I lost it. I told him I couldn't do this anymore. I said, "You promised we'd start focusing on ourselves. You can't keep rescuing them every time something goes wrong." He looked at me and said, "What am I supposed to do? Let him lose his home?" I said, "No, but you could let him figure it out without writing another check." He didn't say anything after that. He just went to bed. The next week, we barely spoke. The tension in the house was unbearable. Every morning, I'd see him lacing up his boots before work, his expression heavy and worn out. I think he started realizing how tired he really was, but he refused to admit it. Then one night, he came home early. He looked pale, sweating, and said his chest hurt. I called 911 without thinking. He'd had a mild heart attack. That was the breaking point. He spent 2 nights in the hospital. The doctor told him flat out that he needed to slow down. That stress was taking a serious toll. I sat next to his bed, holding his hand, and I said quietly, "This is what I was afraid of." He didn't argue. He just stared at the ceiling and said, "I don't know who I am if I'm not working." It broke my heart. After he got home, something shifted. I think he finally understood what I'd been trying to say for years. He told me he was scared of being useless. He said, "If I retire, I won't have a purpose. The kids won't need me anymore," I told him. "They'll always need you, just not in the same way. You're their father." not their bank. We started having real conversations, painful, honest ones, for the first time in a long time. He listened. I showed him how much we had saved, how we could live comfortably, even if we helped the kids occasionally, and how we'd both work too hard to spend our later years like this. He didn't say much, but I could see the gears turning. About 3 weeks ago, he told me he'd given his 2 months' notice. I nearly cried. He said it quietly, like he was afraid saying it out loud would jinx it. He even started going through old travel brochures I'd left on the counter months ago. The kids didn't take it well at first. When Ryan heard, he panicked. "What am I supposed to do if I can't find another job soon?" Mark told him, "You'll figure it out. You're stronger than you think." It was the first time I'd ever heard him set that kind of boundary. Emma worried about her tuition, and Tyler tried to make a joke about being cut off. But I think they all knew things were changing. Since then, Mark has been lighter. He still worries. Of course, he's Mark. But there's a calmness to him I haven't seen in years. He's been working on the old motorcycle in the garage, something he used to love doing before life got in the way. We've been going on small weekend trips, testing what retirement might look like together. For the first time, it feels like we're moving towards something instead of away from it. Ryan found part-time work last week. It's not perfect, but it's a start. Emma picked up an internship that pays a small stipend. Tyler finally applied for a full-time position at a local HVAC company. They're all figuring things out in their own way. And while they still lean on us emotionally, they're learning to handle more on their own. Sometimes I catch Mark watching them with this quiet mix of pride and disbelief. The other night he said, "Maybe you were right. Maybe helping them meant letting go a little." I told him, "It's never too late to start." He'll be officially retired in 3 weeks. We're planning a trip down to Florida once he's done, to visit my sister. It feels like closing one chapter and starting another. I know there will still be bumps. There always are. But for the first time in a long time, it feels like we're both standing on the same side of things. It took a health scare, a lot of hard conversations, and years of frustration. But I think he finally understands that retiring doesn't mean losing who he is. It means getting a chance to live the life he worked so hard to build. Final update. It's been a little over a year since my last post, and I can finally say that life feels peaceful again. Something I couldn't imagine back then. Mark has been retired for almost 10 months now, and it's like I'm living with a different person. He struggled a lot in the first few weeks after leaving his job. I think he expected retirement to feel like a long vacation, but once the excitement wore off, there was this quiet emptiness that scared him. He'd wake up early out of habit, make coffee, and just sit at the kitchen table staring out the window. I'd ask what he was thinking, and he'd shrug and say, "I just don't know what to do with myself." It broke my heart to see him like that, but I knew he had to find his own rhythm. At first, he threw himself into home projects, fixing the deck, repainting the garage, organizing every tool he's ever owned. Then one morning in March, he told me he'd signed up to volunteer with Habitat for Humanity. He said, "At least I'll still be building something." I don't think I've ever seen him prouder than when he came home after his first day, covered in dust but smiling like he used to. He said, "It feels good to use my hands again. As for me, retirement has been exactly what I hoped for. I've been spending time gardening, taking watercolor classes, and catching up with old friends. I even convinced Mark to take a yoga class with me once. He complained the whole time but admitted afterward that his back felt better than it had in years. We took that trip to Florida right after he retired, and it was wonderful. We stayed with my sister for a few days and then rented a car to drive along the coast. We stopped at random little beach towns, ate seafood, and walked for miles every day. I hadn't seen Mark laugh that much in years. One night, while we were sitting on the balcony watching the sunset, he said, "I wish I'd done this sooner." I didn't say, "I told you so," even though I wanted to. I just said, "Me too." Our kids are all doing better too, though it took some tough love to get there. Ryan found a stable job in property management. He's still in the condo, but now he's fully covering his own expenses. He called a few months ago to say, "I think I finally get what you meant when you said you can't fix everything for us." That might have been the proudest I've ever felt as a mom. Emma graduated this summer and got hired by a nonprofit. She's barely scraping by, but she's so passionate about what she's doing that it's hard not to admire her. We helped her move into a small apartment in Columbus, and she insisted on paying for her own utilities. Mark tried to slip her a check, and she gave it back, saying, "You've done enough, Dad." He just smiled and nodded. I think it meant the world to him. Tyler, of all people, surprised us the most. He landed a full-time job with that HVAC company and actually stuck with it. He's been saving money, talking about maybe buying a small place in a few years. The other day, he called to ask Mark for advice about a repair job. Not for money. I think that moment hit Mark hard, in a good way. He hung up and said, "They really don't need us like they used to, huh?" I said, "They still need you. Just not your wallet." Our relationship has grown stronger too. For years, we were partners who loved each other but moved in different directions. Now we're finally walking side by side again. We take road trips with no plans, spend mornings on the porch reading, and sometimes just sit quietly together without that heavy tension that used to hang between us. One evening not long ago, we were sitting outside watching fireflies when Mark said something that stuck with me. He said, "You know, I thought retiring meant losing my purpose. But maybe my purpose just changed. Maybe it's being here with you." I don't cry easily, but that one got me. We still help the kids now and then. Birthday gifts, a little extra at Christmas. But it's out of love, not guilt. They handle their own lives, and we finally get to handle ours. Looking back, I think the hardest part wasn't getting him to retire. It was getting him to believe he deserved to. So many people spend their whole lives working and forget that it's okay to stop. It's okay to rest. It's okay to let your kids struggle a little so they can grow. If anyone reading this is in the same position, stuck between guilt and exhaustion, please know this. You don't owe the world every last piece of yourself. You can love your family deeply and still choose to protect your own peace. We've started planning our next trip, this time out west to see the Grand Canyon. Something we've both dreamed about since we were young, and for the first time, I know we'll actually go. No excuses, no delays, no maybe next year's. We're finally living the life we worked so hard to build. Together, and that's all I ever wanted. Stories number 4. My stepdaughter's mom got furious over our group Halloween costume and now everything's falling apart. Halloween has always been a big deal for me. Not in a crazy haunted house kind of way, but it's one of those holidays that makes everyone loosen up, laugh, and just be creative. So when my wife Emily and I got married last year, I was excited to share that spirit with her 2 daughters. Lily 10 and Hannah 8. They're incredible kids, smart, funny, and full of personality. Their mom, Rachel, and Emily have a decent co-parenting setup. It's not perfect, but they make it work. I always try to stay respectful and out of the middle. This year was the first Halloween where I really felt like part of the family. The girls started talking about costume ideas in early September. Lily wanted to be a ghost, Hannah wanted to be a witch, and I thought it would be fun if we did a group theme. We tossed around a bunch of ideas, Disney villains, cartoon characters, superheroes, but nothing really stuck. Then one evening, while we were watching an old movie marathon, Hannah pointed at the screen and shouted, "Let's be Ghostbusters." It was perfect. They both loved the idea. We could build the costumes ourselves, make the proton packs out of cardboard, even get Daisy, our dog, to wear a little ghost plush costume. Emily loved it too. She's not big on dressing up, but she said she'd wear a ghost costume so we could all be in the theme together. I started sketching out the designs and looking up materials online. The girls helped with the painting and cutting, and our dining table basically became a crafting war zone for a week. It felt like something out of a movie. The laughter, the glue disasters, the pure excitement of it all. For the first time, I didn't feel like just their stepdad. I felt like part of their little world. The weekend before Halloween, Emily texted Rachel a few pictures of the girls working on their costumes, just to share. That's when things started to go sideways. Rachel apparently called Emily not even 10 minutes later, furious, according to Emily. She said the Ghostbusters costumes were inappropriate because the movie was too adult for kids. She also said it was weird that I was doing a group costume with them and that it made her uncomfortable. I was floored. I wasn't even in the picture she sent. The costumes were literally khaki jumpsuits and cardboard backpacks. Nothing revealing, nothing offensive. Rachel told Emily she didn't want the girls wearing them on her week, which just happened to include Halloween night. Emily told her that wasn't fair since we'd all worked on them together. And the girls were excited. Rachel said she'd make them new costumes for her house instead, and that we could play Ghostbusters on our own time. The girls were crushed, Lily cried, saying, "But it's our costume." Hannah kept asking if she did something wrong. It broke my heart. I told Emily maybe we should just drop it. I didn't want to start drama, but she said no. The girls deserved to have something they were proud of. Halloween night rolled around, and Rachel stuck to her word. She made the girls go as matching black cats. which would have been fine if they hadn't been so disappointed. Emily and I stayed home that night, handing out candy. Around 7:30, there was a knock at the door. It was Lily and Hannah, holding their black cattails in their hands. Apparently, Rachel had agreed to let them stop by for a few minutes. They ran inside, went straight to their rooms, and came back out wearing their Ghostbusters outfits. They were grinning from ear to ear. We took pictures, walked around the block with Daisy, and watched them laugh as neighbors complimented their homemade proton packs. It was one of the best nights I've had in years, but apparently it didn't stay peaceful. The next day, Rachel called Emily again, this time screaming. Someone had posted photos of the girls in their costumes on social media. Our neighbor had tagged us, and Rachel was livid. She accused Emily of going behind her back, called me manipulative, and said I had no right to get involved in the girls' holiday plans. Emily tried to reason with her, but Rachel hung up after saying, "You're confusing my kids. They don't know who their real parent is anymore." That one hit me like a gut punch. I've never tried to replace her. I know I'm the stepdad. I know my place. But I also love those girls. I tuck them in when they're at our house. I make their lunches, help with homework, teach them how to ride their bikes. I've done everything I can to make them feel safe and loved, not to steal them. After that fight, Rachel sent a message saying she wanted boundaries. She said from now on, I shouldn't be included in decisions about the girls' activities unless they happen at our house. That means no school projects, no costume planning, no sports sign-ups. Basically, she wants me invisible when it comes to anything she can control. It's been weeks now, and the tension hasn't eased. The girls still talk about how fun that night was. They keep their Ghostbusters gear in their room and play with it every weekend they're here. But now, they're starting to pick up on the tension between their mom and Emily. Lily even asked, "Did we make Mom mad because we wore the costumes?" I told her no, that none of this was her fault. But deep down, I'm angry that Rachel's turning something that was supposed to be joyful into a weapon. Emily says she'll handle it. She's trying to keep communications civil. But Rachel's been cold and distant. Every exchange feels like a minefield now. I hate it. I don't want to be the reason things get worse. Part of me wonders if I should have stepped back from the start. Maybe Rachel saw the costumes as me taking over something that used to be hers. A family tradition, maybe? I don't know. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I can't shake the guilt. Did I cross a line without realizing it? All I wanted was to make the girls happy, to be part of something fun. Now, every time I see those little proton packs hanging in the hallway, I feel a mix of pride and regret. Pride because we built something together. Regret because I didn't realize how fragile the balance in blended families can be. The girls keep asking what we're doing for Christmas. I want to say something amazing, but honestly, I don't even know if I'll be allowed to help plan it. Sometimes love isn't enough to make everyone comfortable, and sometimes doing something good can still make you the villain in someone else's story. Update: it's been almost 2 months since Halloween, and things have shifted, not perfectly, not cleanly, but in that slow, human way where life keeps moving whether you're ready or not. After the fight with Rachel, Emily and I decided to step back for a while. We didn't want the girls caught in the middle, and we figured time might cool things down. But time, as it turns out, doesn't heal resentment when people keep feeding it. Rachel started being passive-aggressive in little ways. She'd make accidental comments in front of the girls. Things like, "Maybe next year you can have a costume your real mom picks." Or, "I don't want strangers making family decisions." Lily told Emily about it one night when we were having dinner, and I could tell it was eating her up. I've never seen a 10-year-old look so conflicted between two people she loves. That night, after the girls went to bed, I told Emily I was thinking of apologizing to Rachel directly. Not because I believed I'd done anything wrong, but because I thought maybe it would help. Emily hesitated at first, but then she said, "Maybe it's time. Maybe she just needs to hear it from you." So I reached out. I sent Rachel a long text explaining that I never meant to step over boundaries, that I respected her role as the girl's mother, and that I only wanted to be a positive presence in their lives. I told her I'd back off on the big decisions if it helped her feel more comfortable. She didn't respond for 2 days. When she finally did, it was a single sentence. "I appreciate you saying that. That was it." No olive branch, no let's talk, but weirdly enough, it still felt like progress. A few weeks later, the school hosted a winter craft fair. The girls wanted both of us, me and Rachel, to come. I wasn't sure if that was a good idea, but Emily said it might be a chance to show Rachel that we could all coexist without tension. So we went. And honestly, it was awkward as hell at first. Rachel barely looked at me, her smile tight, polite. But the girls were over the moon. They kept dragging both of us from table to table, showing us their artwork and the little ornaments they'd made. Then something unexpected happened. Lily was carrying one of her Ghostbusters patches on her backpack. She'd sewn it there herself. A woman at one of the stands saw it and said, "Oh, that's adorable. You made that?" Lily beamed and said, "Yeah, me and my stepdad made the costume together." For a split second, I saw Rachel's jaw tighten like she wanted to say something. Then she just sighed. She smiled at Lily and said, "It was a really cool costume." That moment, it was small, but it felt huge. Like the air had finally shifted after the fair. Rachel actually came up to me in the parking lot. She said, "I overreacted about Halloween." I was so surprised I almost didn't know how to respond. She went on saying, "It's hard, you know? Seeing someone else get to be there for things I can't always be part of." I told her I understood. That I'd never try to replace her. And that she'd always be the girl's mother. She nodded, said thank you, and that was it. It wasn't some big movie moment of reconciliation, but it was the first time we'd spoken like two people instead of rivals. Since then, things have been easier. Rachel started texting Emily about schedules again without the frosty tone. She even sent a photo of the girls helping her decorate her tree and said, "They want to make sure you two come to the holiday concert." That message nearly made Emily cry. The girls, of course, have been blissfully unaware of most of the tension. To them, everything's back to normal. They're already planning what to wear for the concert and asking if Daisy can come dressed as a reindeer again. A few nights ago, while we were decorating our own tree, Lily handed me a small box she'd wrapped herself. Inside was a keychain she'd made at school. A little cardboard proton pack painted gold. With "Best Stepdad" scribbled on the back. I didn't even know what to say. I just hugged her, hard, and that's when it hit me. I've been walking on eggshells for months, afraid to mess up the fragile balance between Rachel and Emily, between stepdad and real dad. But the truth is, the girls already know where my heart is. I don't need to prove it to anyone else. Rachel and I will probably never be best friends. There will always be friction. It's just the reality of blended families. But I think she's starting to see that I'm not her enemy. I'm just another adult who loves her kids and wants the best for them. Emily told me last night that she's proud of me for not giving up on peace, even when it felt hopeless. She said, "You showed her who you are without ever saying it." Maybe that's the real lesson here. You can't force people to trust you. You just have to keep showing up, over and over, until they realize you mean it. So yeah, things are better, not perfect, but better. The girls still wear their Ghostbusters jumpsuits when they play in the yard. Rachel still rolls her eyes when Emily and I get a little too crafty with projects. But the tension's faded into something almost like normal family chaos. And every time I see those two running around with their proton packs yelling, "Who you gonna call?" I remember that night. The night everything blew up. And how far we've come since then. Sometimes peace doesn't come from winning an argument. It comes from choosing not to fight one. Update 2. It's been almost a full year since that Halloween that started all the chaos. And reading back over what I wrote feels surreal. So much has changed. Some of it for the better. Some of it in ways I didn't expect at all, but looking back, I can honestly say I've learned more about family this past year than I did in my first 3 decades of life. After that winter craft fair moment, things between Rachel and us stayed calm. Not warm, not friendly, but peaceful. And peace, in blended family terms, is worth more than gold. We stuck to neutral communication. Texts about pickup times, school projects, permission slips. Short, factual, and polite. No arguments. No emotion, just stability, but even with things smoother, there were these weird moments that made me realize how delicate that peace really was. Like when Lily had a dance recital in March, Rachel and Emily both showed up, but they sat on opposite ends of the auditorium. I sat next to Emily, holding a bouquet for Lily, but I could feel Rachel's eyes on me a few times. When the recital ended, Lily ran up to both of us and gave me the flowers first, saying, "You bought them, right?" I handed them right to Rachel without thinking. Just said, "You give them to your mom." Rachel looked startled, but she smiled. Maybe for the first time, she understood that I wasn't trying to compete. I just wanted to support. Around that time, Emily and I also started talking about our own future. I'm 35, she's 32, and while we've always said the girls were enough, she admitted one night she sometimes thinks about having one more. Maybe not now, but someday. That hit me in a strange way. Not because I don't want that, But because I realized we'd have to navigate an even more complicated version of the same dynamic, would Rachel resent us for expanding our family? Would the girls feel left out, like we were building something separate from them? I told Emily we'd need to tread carefully, but before we could even figure that out, life threw us another curveball. In May, Rachel broke her ankle in a car accident. Nothing catastrophic, but bad enough that she couldn't drive or work for a while. The girls stayed with us for nearly 3 weeks straight while she recovered. It was unexpectedly good. At first, Rachel was hesitant. She hates depending on anyone, especially us. But Emily offered to help with groceries and school runs, and I offered to drive the girls to visit her every other day. The first time I showed up at her place alone to drop off the girls, Rachel actually invited me in. We talked for real this time. She told me she'd been struggling more than she let on. Her mom's been sick, she's had financial stress, and she admitted that when she saw the girls bonding with me, it triggered something deep. Something she didn't even understand herself. "I wasn't mad at you," she said. "I was mad at how easily you fit into a space I used to fill." I told her I understood, and that I'd never want to take that from her. We talked for maybe an hour, and when I left, she said something that stuck with me. "They're lucky to have all of us, even if it's messy." That was the first time she'd ever included me in us after she recovered. Things got easier. The girls started talking about our family without separating it into 2 homes. Rachel even came to our house one afternoon in June to pick them up and stayed for coffee. It was casual, awkward for maybe the first 5 minutes. And then normal, it hit me then. This is what co-parenting should look like. Not perfect harmony, but mutual respect. A truce built on realizing no one's trying to win. Summer came, and we all went to the 4th of July parade together. Rachel, Emily, me, and the girls. We didn't plan to. It just happened. We ran into her at the park, and the girls begged us to sit together. So we did. It wasn't weird, it wasn't tense, it was nice. We even laughed at Daisy barking at the fireworks. Then, right before school started again, the girls brought up Halloween. I braced myself for déjà vu, but Rachel actually asked us what they wanted to do this year. The girls screamed, "Group costume again," before I could even blink. I waited for Rachel to protest, but she just said, "As long as it's appropriate, I'm in. You could have knocked me over with a feather." This year, we're all doing a Wizard of Oz theme. Lily as Dorothy, Hannah as the Scarecrow, Rachel as Glinda, Emily as the Tin Woman, and me as the Cowardly Lion. The girls are ecstatic. They've already started helping me build the lion mane out of yarn. The other night, Emily turned to me and said, "A year ago, we couldn't even mention costumes without a fight." And she's right. It's wild how something that once tore us apart somehow became the thing that helped bring us together. I know not every blended family gets this ending. I know there's always going to be bumps ahead, different opinions, new challenges, life just happening. But I've learned that being a step-parent isn't about walking a tightrope between 2 sides. It's about being steady when the rope shakes. Rachel and I will never be best friends. We don't text memes or call each other for advice, but we've built this quiet kind of understanding. She knows I love her daughters, and I know she trusts me with them now. That's more than enough. The girls, meanwhile, are thriving. Lily joined the art club, Hannah started soccer, and both of them keep asking if Daisy can trick or treat again. And me? I've stopped second-guessing every move. I've stopped worrying if Rachel thinks I'm overstepping. I just focus on being there. For the girls. For Emily. For the life we've built sometimes. The hardest thing about being a step-parent isn't the parenting. It's accepting that love doesn't always fit neatly into roles or titles. You can love someone fully, even if you didn't get to be there from the beginning. You can belong, even if you weren't born into the family. I used to think I'd ruined everything that Halloween night. Now, looking at where we are, a family that laughs together, argues less, and shows up for each other, I realize maybe that night was just the messy start of something better. If you told me a year ago that I'd be sewing a lion tail with my wife while my stepdaughters giggle next to their mom, I'd have said you were out of your mind. But here we are, and somehow it feels right. Final update. It's been 2 full years since that first Halloween post. The one that started with a silly costume idea and spiraled into emotional warfare. And now I'm sitting here in my office, coffee going cold, just reflecting on how far we've all come. It's strange how something that felt like the end of our family turned out to be the beginning of something stronger. Life has this funny way of testing you with the same lesson until you finally learn it. For me, that lesson was patience. After our Wizard of Oz group costume last year, Everything changed again, but this time in quieter, more meaningful ways. The girls are older now. Lily just turned 11. Hannah is 8 going on 18. They're smart, independent, and starting to form opinions about everything, which means, of course, that Halloween costumes aren't as simple as before. This year, they both wanted to do their own thing. No more family themes. At first, Emily and I felt a little pang of nostalgia. We loved those goofy matching costumes. But then I realized this is what growing up looks like. The goal isn't to keep them little. It's to make sure they feel safe being themselves. Rachel surprised us again. She called, not texted, just to ask if we'd be okay helping with costumes since the girls wanted to coordinate between both houses. Her tone wasn't defensive. It was cooperative, like we were teammates. So we all met at her place one afternoon. I helped Lily design her vampire costume, while Emily and Rachel chatted about Hannah's witch outfit. At one point, the girls started arguing about whose broomstick was cooler. And without thinking, both Rachel and Emily scolded them in sync. We all froze, then just burst out laughing. That moment right there, that was family, not the kind I grew up imagining, but the kind that's built piece by piece. Over time, with a lot of humility and forgiveness. Over the past year, the girls' school started this new family night once a month, where parents and guardians can come for games, crafts, or dinner. The first time we all went together. A teacher actually thought Emily and Rachel were sisters. Rachel joked, "Oh no, we just share the same taste in chaos," and weirdly enough, she meant it kindly. She and I have reached a place of mutual trust I never thought possible. When her mother passed away earlier this year, Emily and I attended the funeral. Rachel hugged Emily first, then me. No awkwardness. Just grief and understanding. A few months later, Rachel got a new job offer out of town. About 2 hours away, she was torn. It paid better, but it meant moving the girls farther from their school and friends. She asked to meet us before making the decision. We sat at her kitchen table. Me, Emily, and Rachel. While the girls watched a movie in the other room, she said, "I don't want to make this decision without talking to you both. You've been part of their lives every day. They'd miss you." That hit me hard. Not just because she valued my opinion, but because she finally said it out loud. That I mattered in their lives. We talked for nearly 3 hours. Ultimately, she decided to stay. She said, "Home doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be close enough for love to still show up." Since then, things have been easier. Not perfect. Co-parenting never is, but honest. There's no more competition, no more hidden resentment. Just an understanding that we're all doing the best we can for the same 2 kids. And speaking of kids, remember how Emily and I used to say we weren't sure about having one of our own? Well, that changed. Emily is 5 months pregnant. When we found out, my heart was split between excitement and fear. Excitement, because I've always wanted to experience fatherhood from the very beginning. Fear, because I worried about how Lily and Hannah would react. Or how Rachel might. We waited until the 2nd trimester to tell everyone. The girls were over the moon. Lily shouted, "We're gonna be big sisters." And Hannah immediately claimed dibs on teaching the baby to walk. Rachel's reaction caught me off guard. She came by one weekend for pickup, and Emily gently told her. For a moment, Rachel went quiet. I braced for the awkward tension I used to dread. But instead, she smiled and said, "Congratulations. The girls are lucky. They'll get to show a baby how it's done." It wasn't forced. It wasn't fake. It was genuine. Later that night, I found myself thinking about how different that reaction was from 2 years ago, when even a Halloween photo could set off a storm. Now, we were celebrating together. It feels like we've all finally found our rhythm. The girls help paint the nursery sometimes when they're with us. Rachel even donated their old baby books and crib, she told Emily. I want the baby to have something from the girls' history, too. That gesture meant more than she'll ever know. We decided to name the baby after Emily's late father, and when we told the girls, Lily said, "That sounds like a hero's name." She's been writing little notes to the baby already. Sometimes, when I look at our life now, I can't believe where we started. 2 years ago, I was a nervous stepdad, terrified of overstepping, trying to navigate the invisible line between helpful and intrusive. Now, I feel like we've created something real. Messy, yes, but beautiful. I've learned that family isn't defined by who's biologically connected, or even who lives under the same roof. It's about the people who keep showing up, even after the fights, the misunderstandings, and the heartbreaks. Love isn't about bloodlines. It's about consistency. This Halloween, we won't be doing a group costume. Instead, The girls are going trick-or-treating with their friends, and Emily and I will be handing out candy while Rachel stops by to drop off some cupcakes she made for the baby. If someone had told me 2 years ago that I'd be laughing on the porch with my wife, my stepdaughters, and their mom, no tension, no walls, just love and understanding, I'd have thought they were insane, but that's life. The same moments that once tore you apart can be the ones that build you stronger later. Our story started with a Halloween costume. Now it's growing into something even bigger. A family that finally feels whole. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm walking on eggshells, I feel at home. Stories number 5. My nanny job got really weird after I caught my employers doing something I can't unhear. I've been a nanny for about a year, and until recently, it was one of those rare jobs that actually felt too good to be true. The parents, Mark and Allison, seemed cool. The pay was solid, and the 2 kids I watched, Liam 4 and Ella 2, were adorable little chaos machines but manageable. I worked weekdays, usually from 8 a.m. to around 5 p.m., and they always treated me with respect. They even gave me bonuses on holidays. Mark works in real estate and usually spends his mornings at home on calls before heading to showings. Allison works remotely as a marketing consultant. Their home was this big renovated farmhouse outside of Columbus, the kind of place that had barn doors, white walls, and perfectly staged, casual furniture that probably cost more than my car. I thought I'd lucked out completely, and then I started hearing things. It started on a Wednesday around 11:30 a.m. I had just put Ella down for her nap, and Liam was watching Bluey in the living room. I went to grab some laundry from the upstairs hall closet when I heard a noise coming from the parents' bedroom. Like muffled laughter and, well, something else. At first, I assumed Mark was on a call. But then I heard a sound that was definitely not business-related. You know how your brain just freezes in moments like that? That was me, just standing there holding a pile of toddler clothes, staring at the wall, realizing exactly what was happening on the other side. I tiptoed back downstairs, my face red as a tomato, and tried to focus on Liam pretending his toy truck could fly. I told myself it was probably a one-time thing. Maybe they got carried away on a lunch break. Adults do that sometimes, right? Not ideal when your nanny is downstairs, but whatever. I could handle one awkward day. Except it kept happening. The next week, same time, same situation. Ella down for her nap, Liam watching TV, and faint noises floating down from upstairs. I cranked the volume on Bluey until the poor cartoon dogs were shouting over each other. I didn't say anything, because how do you even start that conversation? Hey, can you not have loud sex while I'm folding your laundry? I figured they'd realize how obvious it was and stop. They didn't. Over the next few weeks it turned into a pattern. Always late morning or early afternoon. Always when the kids were occupied. Sometimes I'd even hear them laughing afterward. One time I swear I heard Mark say, "She probably has no idea." That one made my blood boil. I started to feel uncomfortable being there. Like I was intruding on something that should never happen in a shared workspace. I mean, this was my job. I'm in their home, caring for their kids. I shouldn't have to listen to that. It got to the point where I started planning my schedule around it. I'd take the kids outside to play in the yard around that time, just so I wouldn't have to be near the noise. But then winter hit, and the yard wasn't an option. One day, after another round of awkward sounds and me pretending not to hear them, I vented to my friend Megan over text. She's also a nanny and told me straight up, "You need to say something." That's not okay, so I tried. The next morning, when Allison came down for coffee, I casually said, "Hey, I was wondering if there's a better time I could do the kids' laundry. I feel like I keep walking in at bad moments when you two are having your private time." I swear, her face went completely blank for a second. Then she laughed nervously and said, "Oh my God, you heard that?" We didn't think it was that noticeable. I didn't even know what to say. She kept talking, saying something about how being parents is hard and how they try to keep the spark alive. I just nodded, pretending to agree, while wishing the earth would open up and swallow me. Later that day, Mark came home early and made this weird joke like, "Guess we've been a little too loud, huh?" and then winked. I wanted to crawl into a hole. After that, things were tense. They stopped being as chatty with me. I started getting passive-aggressive comments from Allison like, "Oh, I know you're sensitive about noise." One day she actually said, "We trust you to be discreet," in this tone that made me feel like I was the one doing something wrong. A few weeks later, I got a text from Allison saying they were going to take a break from using a nanny for a while and reevaluate their childcare needs. I was being let go. Nicely. with a week's severance but still let go. I asked if it was about what I'd said, and she swore it wasn't. But come on, the timing was too perfect. I'd worked there for nearly a year without one complaint. Then I speak up about something that made me uncomfortable, and suddenly they don't need help anymore? It messed with my confidence for a while. I started wondering if maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe I should have just ignored it. But then I thought about how uncomfortable I'd felt, standing in their hallway, pretending not to hear them while taking care of their kids. And no, this wasn't about being prudish, it was about professionalism and respect. Now I work for another family, 2 moms with 3 kids, and they're amazing. Their home is lively, messy, and loud, but in a totally normal, kid-friendly way. The kind of loud that comes from laughter and toys hitting the floor, not whatever that was. Sometimes I think about Mark and Allison, and how mortified I was the day I confronted them. Part of me still gets secondhand embarrassment just remembering it. But another part of me feels proud that I said something, because being a nanny means you're in this weird limbo between family and employee. You see things, hear things, and learn things you never expected to, but you still deserve boundaries. And if that makes me sensitive, then so be it. Update: I didn't think I'd ever have to revisit this. But a few months after leaving that nanny job, something unexpected happened that kind of forced me to face it again. And honestly, it brought a mix of closure and secondhand cringe I wasn't ready for after they let me go. I started working for another family, Dana and Kimberly, 2 moms with 3 kids. They treated me like an actual human being, respected my space, and never made me feel weird for being in their home. It was such a breath of fresh air that I started realizing just how tense and self-conscious I'd become at my old job with Mark and Allison. I didn't realize how much I'd been holding my breath all the time. About 3 months into my new job, I ran into Allison completely by accident. I was at Target getting a few things for the kids I watch now, and there she was in the baby aisle with Ella sitting in the cart. I almost turned around and bolted, but she saw me first. "Hey," she said, all cheerful like we were best friends catching up. "Oh my gosh, how are you?" I smiled and said I was doing fine, working with a new family, loving it. And that's when she said something that threw me off completely. "I hope you don't think things ended badly," she said, lowering her voice like we were sharing a secret. "It was just complicated between Mark and me at the time. We were kind of going through a rough patch." I didn't really know what to say to that, so I nodded and said, "I understand," which was the safest, most neutral sentence I could think of. But then she added, "I probably shouldn't have made you feel awkward about that stuff. We weren't in a great place." That's when it hit me. Maybe all that midday activity hadn't been about keeping the spark alive, like she joked before. Maybe it was a desperate attempt to patch something that was already breaking. I mumbled something polite, and we both moved on, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few weeks later, I got a message on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. It was Mark. I froze when I saw the name. The message said, "Hey, I hope this isn't weird, but I wanted to apologize for the unprofessional stuff that happened while you worked for us. We were going through a lot. You didn't deserve to be in that situation." I must have read it 10 times before responding. It was short, but surprisingly mature, and way more self-aware than I expected. I replied with a simple, "Thanks. I appreciate that." He saw it but didn't reply again, which honestly was fine by me. But here's where things got even weirder. About a month after that, I was chatting with another nanny at the park, someone I'd just met named Melissa, and we were trading nanny horror stories. When I mentioned I used to work for a family near Columbus with 2 kids, she suddenly said, "Wait, was it a big white farmhouse with a garden in the back?" I nodded slowly, feeling my stomach twist. Her face said it all. Apparently, after I left, they hired another nanny. And guess what? She quit after 3 weeks. Melissa told me the new nanny had complained that Mark and Allison were inappropriately affectionate around her. Not necessarily doing what I overheard, but definitely crossing boundaries. She said they'd cuddle on the couch right in front of her while she was feeding the kids, or make comments that made her uncomfortable. That poor girl finally told them it was weird and unprofessional. And according to Melissa, Allison got defensive and said something like, "We're a loving couple. Sorry if that makes you uncomfortable." 3 days later, the nanny quit. That story made my blood boil and weirdly, made me feel validated at the same time. Like, okay, I wasn't overreacting, I wasn't being uptight. That behavior was legitimately inappropriate. The next time I ran into Megan, my nanny friend who told me to speak up in the first place, I told her everything. She laughed and said, You're like the ghost of nannies past haunting that couple until they get therapy. She wasn't entirely wrong. Since then, I've thought a lot about boundaries and how blurry they get when you work in someone's home. You see people at their most unfiltered. You know their routines, their arguments, their habits. But that doesn't mean you stop being an employee. You deserve professionalism, even if your office has Legos on the floor and a fridge full of apple juice. Working for Dana and Kimberly has reminded me what that looks like. They thank me at the end of every day, include me in family dinners sometimes, but they never make me feel like I'm intruding on their personal life. It's the balance I didn't realize I needed. As for Mark and Allison, who knows, maybe they worked things out, maybe they didn't. Maybe they'll keep cycling through nannies until they figure out that some problems can't be solved in the middle of a weekday with the door half shut. Every now and then, I still think about the absurdity of it all. How one minute I was folding toddler laundry, and the next, I was questioning my entire career because two adults couldn't control their impulses. But then I remember that speaking up didn't ruin anything. It protected my own boundaries. And that's something I'll never apologize for again. Final update. I didn't expect to write another update about this, but so much has happened since the last one that it feels like the story needs a proper ending. Not a dramatic one. Just the kind of quiet, full-circle ending that sneaks up on you. It's been almost a full year since I left Mark and Allison's house, and a lot has changed, mostly for the better. I'm still working for Dana and Kimberly, and I've honestly never had a job that made me feel this appreciated. Their kids are now 6, 4, and 18 months, and I've become something between a nanny, an aunt, and a semi-permanent family member. They even invited me on their family trip to Michigan last summer, and I cried when they surprised me with my own little cabin. But this update isn't really about them. It's about what happened when I unexpectedly ran into Mark again, and how it gave me a kind of closure I didn't realize I still needed. It was mid-September, and Dana asked if I could pick up some birthday decorations for her daughter's party from a local event supply store. I went during my lunch break, and guess who was standing in the checkout line when I walked in? Mark. I almost didn't recognize him at first. He looked different. He'd lost some weight, had a beard now, and wasn't wearing his usual business clothes. Just jeans and a t-shirt that said Single Dad Squad. He noticed me after a few seconds and gave this half smile, the kind you give when you recognize someone but aren't sure if they hate you. I debated pretending not to see him, but my conscience won out. I walked up and said, "Hey." He smiled for real this time and said, "Wow, it's been a while." Then he paused, awkwardly scratched the back of his neck and said, "I'm guessing you heard about the divorce?" I hadn't. But I nodded like I had, because the last thing I wanted to do was ask questions about their marriage in an event store surrounded by helium balloons. He must have read the surprise on my face, though, because he added, "Yeah, it's been a year." He looked tired, not in a bad way, just the kind of tired that comes from too much change too fast. He said Allison had moved out earlier that summer, and that they were doing shared custody of the kids. He also mentioned that she'd taken a new job out of town. I didn't pry for details, but he volunteered one anyway. Honestly, we weren't doing great for a long time. That whole situation with you. It was part of that mess. It took me a second to realize what he meant. Then he sighed and said, "We were both so caught up trying to pretend everything was fine. It wasn't about you. You just got caught in the middle." I didn't really know what to say, but I told him I appreciated him saying that. He nodded, then said something that actually made me respect him a little. "I think we both learned a lot about boundaries the hard way," he said. "And, maybe how not to mix them up." I smiled. Not out of bitterness, but because for the first time, it didn't sting anymore. It just felt like a weird, old story that had finally settled into the past. We talked for maybe 5 minutes. It wasn't awkward after that. Just two people who'd been through a bizarre situation, acknowledging it without pretending it hadn't happened. Before I left, he asked if the family I worked for now was treating me well, and when I said yes, he actually smiled and said, "Good. You deserve that." That moment kind of sealed it for me. When I got back to work, Dana noticed I seemed distracted, so I told her the story. She laughed and said, "You have the strangest luck," then added, "At least it sounds like everyone grew up a bit." And honestly, she's right. I realized that what started as this humiliating, uncomfortable situation turned into one of the biggest lessons I've had in my early adulthood. People's private lives will always spill out in messy ways when you work inside their homes. But that doesn't mean you have to accept being disrespected or uncomfortable. Setting boundaries doesn't make you difficult. It just means you respect yourself enough to expect professionalism. Even from people who sign your paychecks. I'm 24 now, still in childcare. But I'm also taking online classes in early education because I think I've finally figured out what I want to do long-term. Dana and Kimberly said they'd write me a recommendation whenever I'm ready to apply to teaching programs. Every once in a while I think about how mortified I felt that day in Mark and Allison's house, clutching a basket of laundry while pretending not to hear what was going on upstairs. I remember the guilt, the awkward confrontation, the firing. But then I also remember the relief that came after, the clean slate, the respect I found in my next job, and the peace that followed once I stopped blaming myself for other people's lack of boundaries. So, if you're reading this, and you've ever been in a job that blurred the lines between personal and professional, let me say this. You're not overreacting for wanting respect. You're not being too sensitive for expecting decency. You're just human. And you deserve to feel comfortable in your workspace, even if that workspace happens to be someone else's home. And if I ever end up having kids of my own and hiring a nanny someday, I'll make damn sure my house is a place of professionalism, trust, and, most importantly, closed doors for all the right reasons. That's my final update. I'm at peace with it now. The weird chapter is closed. The universe has a strange sense of humor, but at least it gave me the best kind of ending. Growth, perspective, and quiet, stories number 6. My pregnant wife screamed at me, and I finally snapped. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd raise his voice at his pregnant wife. But that's exactly what happened last week. I'm still shaken by it because I'm not the yelling type. I'm usually the calm one, the fixer, the listener, but months of walking on eggshells, sleepless nights, and unspoken frustration finally pushed me over the edge. My wife, Lauren, is 33 and 6 months pregnant with our first child. I'm 35, and we've been married for 5 years. We've had a good marriage overall, but this pregnancy has been rough. I knew it would come with challenges, mood swings, fatigue, anxiety, but I wasn't prepared for how volatile things would get. It feels like I'm living with someone I barely recognize. Before she got pregnant, Lauren was easygoing. We could talk through anything, but lately, it's like every conversation turns into an argument. If I say the wrong thing, she accuses me of being insensitive. If I don't say anything, she accuses me of not caring. She cries at least once a day, and most of the time, I don't even know what triggered it. I've tried to be patient. I read articles about pregnancy hormones, went to every appointment, made her meals when she didn't feel like cooking, but it never feels like enough. Every time I think I'm doing something right, she finds something wrong. The incident that broke me happened last Thursday. I'd had a long day at work, an endless stream of meetings, deadlines, and last-minute calls. I came home exhausted, hoping for a quiet evening. The house was a mess. There were dishes piled in the sink, clothes scattered across the couch, and Lauren sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop. Crying, I dropped my bag and asked, "What's wrong?" She snapped, "You didn't text me back at lunch." I pulled out my phone and saw that she'd sent a message around noon asking what I wanted for dinner. I'd been in a meeting and forgot to reply. I said, "I'm sorry, I was swamped." "I didn't mean to ignore you," she glared at me through tears and said, "You don't care about me anymore. You don't even check in." I feel like I'm doing this alone. That hit a nerve, because I've been doing everything I can to support her. I said, "Lauren, I'm here every night. I go to every appointment. I'm trying my best." She stood up, her face red and wet with tears, and shouted, "Your best isn't enough." Something inside me cracked. I don't even know what came over me. But I shouted back, "Then what do you want from me?" The words came out louder than I intended. She froze, staring at me like she didn't recognize me. I felt my heart pounding. I said, quieter this time, "I'm doing everything I can, and it still feels like I'm failing. I can't keep walking on eggshells." She started sobbing, saying, "You're yelling at me while I'm pregnant." And that made me feel even worse. I wanted to take it all back, but I also couldn't ignore how drained I was. I told her, "I love you, but this isn't healthy. I can't be the only one trying to hold everything together. You have to meet me halfway." She just shook her head and went upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. That night, I slept on the couch. I didn't even try to go after her because I knew we both needed space. The next morning, she barely looked at me. She went to her doctor's appointment alone, which she's never done before. When she came back, she handed me a note. It said she needed a few days to stay at her mom's house. She wrote that she didn't feel emotionally safe around me right now, which absolutely gutted me. I texted her later that night, apologizing for yelling and saying I just want to fix things. She replied, "I know you didn't mean it, but it hurt. It's been 5 days since then." She's still staying with her mom, And I've been trying to give her space while figuring out how to make things right. I've cleaned the house, finished the nursery, and even started therapy on my own because I realized I've been bottling up too much. Part of me is angry at the situation, not her. I know her hormones are out of control, and I know she's scared. So am I. But it's hard not to feel resentful when every small mistake turns into a war. I miss my wife. I miss how we used to be before everything became tense and fragile. I keep replaying that night in my head, wondering if I could have handled it differently. Maybe I should have just walked away when she yelled instead of snapping. Maybe I should have tried harder to understand what she really needed in that moment. But another part of me knows that no one can be endlessly patient. Everyone breaks eventually. I talked to my therapist yesterday, and she said something that stuck with me. Sometimes putting your foot down isn't about control. It's about self-preservation. She told me that I can love Lauren and still set boundaries, even now that I don't have to lose myself to keep the peace. I'm trying to hold on to that. I'm trying to be ready when she comes home, so we can start over with a clean slate. I know she's the one carrying our child, but in a way, we're both carrying the weight of everything this baby means. Our fears, hopes, exhaustion, and love. I want to believe we'll get through this. I want our child to grow up in a home where both parents are whole, not constantly breaking under pressure. I'll never forget the look on her face that night. Though it was fear mixed with disappointment, and I hate that I caused it. But I also can't go back to pretending that everything's fine when it's not. If we're going to make this work, something has to change. For both of us. Update. It's been about 6 weeks since that night, and I finally feel like things are starting to settle. It wasn't easy getting here, and honestly, I wasn't sure we'd make it through the first 2 weeks after she left. The day after she went to her mom's, the house felt impossibly quiet. I didn't realize how much space her presence filled until it was gone. The nursery door was open, and I remember standing in the doorway, looking at the half-assembled crib and the folded baby clothes on the dresser, and feeling like everything had cracked right down the middle. For the first few days, we barely talked. She'd text me updates about doctor appointments or ask me to drop off a few things at her mom's place. Her vitamins, her pillow, a few maternity clothes. But that was it. Each text felt cold, polite, like I was a distant acquaintance instead of her husband. After about a week, she agreed to talk on the phone. I was nervous the whole day when she finally called. Her voice sounded small and tired. We both apologized at the same time. It was awkward, but it was something. She said she knew I didn't mean to yell, but that it scared her anyway. I told her I was sorry for losing control, and that I never wanted her to feel unsafe with me. Then she admitted that she'd been taking out a lot of her fear and anxiety on me because I'm the closest person to her. She said, "You're my safe place," but I've been turning it into a battlefield. I just sat there holding the phone, not knowing whether to cry or breathe. It was the first real thing she'd said in weeks that didn't sound defensive or angry. It sounded honest. She stayed with her mom for another week after that. But we started talking every day, not about the baby, not about chores, not about who was right or wrong, just small, human conversations. What we ate for dinner, what show we were watching, whether she could feel the baby kick yet. When she finally came home, it wasn't some grand reunion. She just walked in with her overnight bag and said, "Hey!" I asked how she was feeling, and she said, "Better." I didn't try to hug her right away. I just said, "I'm glad you're home." Later that night, she came and sat next to me on the couch and leaned against my shoulder. That was enough. We decided to go to couples therapy together, which was probably the best decision we've made in a long time. Our therapist, Dr. Cohen, doesn't take sides. She just listens and asks hard questions. The first few sessions were mostly her translating what we were really saying to each other. For example, when Lauren said, "You don't care," what she meant was, "I'm scared and I need reassurance." And when I said, "You're being unfair," what I really meant was, "I feel invisible." Hearing it broken down like that made a huge difference. Lauren admitted that she's been terrified about the pregnancy, especially after her sister's miscarriage last year. She said she's constantly worried something will go wrong, and that my calmness sometimes makes her feel like she's carrying that fear alone. I hadn't realized that trying to stay strong for her was actually making her feel isolated. On my end, I told her how helpless I've felt. Like no matter what I do, it's never enough. I said I've been scared too. Scared that I'm already failing as a husband and soon to be dad. For the first time, she didn't argue. She just said, "I don't want you to feel that way." Since then, things have been different. Not perfect, but better. We made a deal to check in with each other once a day. even if it's just 5 minutes of honest talk. We also decided to let certain things slide when tension starts rising. If she feels overwhelmed, I give her space. If I feel burned out, I say so instead of bottling it up. There are still emotional landmines here and there. Last week, she got upset because I came home late from work without texting, and it triggered memories of that night. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "You're right. I should have called. I'm sorry." And that was that. We moved on. The nursery is finished now. We painted the walls a soft sage green, and she picked out this cute woodland-themed bedding set. Sometimes I catch her standing in the doorway, just staring at it, one hand on her belly, smiling. Every time she does that, I feel this quiet rush of relief, like we're finally finding our way back to each other. We've started laughing again, too. Real laughter. Not the forced kind you use to smooth over tension. The other night, we were assembling the stroller, and I couldn't figure out how to fold the thing down. She teased me, saying, "If you can't handle this, good luck with diapers," I shot back. "I'll just read the manual." And she said, "You don't read manuals. You Google everything." For the first time in months, we both cracked up like old times. She's due in 3 months now, and I'm scared. But it's a good kind of scared. The kind that reminds you how much something matters. Looking back, I wish I'd recognized sooner how deep her anxiety ran, and I wish she'd seen how hard I was trying to hold things together. But maybe we both had to break a little to understand how to rebuild. We're still figuring it out day by day, and maybe that's what marriage really is. Not being perfect, but choosing to keep showing up even when it's messy. Sometimes when she's asleep, I rest my hand on her belly and feel our baby kick. And it hits me how close we came to losing this piece. I don't ever want to go back to that version of us, the one full of silence and resentment. We've both learned that love doesn't mean never getting angry. It means caring enough to keep fighting your way back after you do. Final update. Our baby is here. She arrived a little earlier than expected, just shy of 38 weeks. And nothing about the birth went the way we planned. But it's hard to care about that when I look at her now. Her name is Nora, and she's perfect. The night Lauren went into labor was chaotic. It was 2 a.m, and I woke up to her standing beside the bed saying, "I think my water broke." I jumped up, completely disoriented, grabbed my keys, then forgot where I put my wallet. She was surprisingly calm while I ran around like a headless chicken. We got to the hospital in record time, and by then, the contractions were coming fast. Those next 12 hours were a blur. I held her hand, fetched ice chips, rubbed her back, and watched her go through pain that honestly scared me. There were moments where she squeezed my hand so hard I thought it might break. But I didn't care. I just kept whispering, "You're doing great. I'm right here." When Nora finally came out, I cried harder than I thought possible. Not just because she was beautiful and tiny and alive, but because I could finally breathe again. Everything we'd been through, the fights, the therapy, the fear, culminated in that moment. Lauren looked exhausted and radiant all at once. She smiled weakly and said, "We did it," I told her. "You did it." And she said, "No, we did." She had some complications afterward, a small hemorrhage that scared us both. But the doctors handled it quickly. I didn't let go of her hand the whole time. When it was finally over and they wheeled her to recovery, she just kept saying, "I'm okay. We're okay." The first few weeks home were the hardest thing I've ever done. Sleep was a myth, and everything revolved around this tiny person who depended on us for everything. Nora had some feeding issues early on, which sent Lauren into another spiral of guilt and frustration. But this time, instead of clashing, we leaned on each other. There were nights when she cried because Nora wouldn't latch, and instead of walking away or trying to fix it, I just sat with her. Sometimes I'd take the baby, walk the hallway in circles, humming nonsense songs until she finally fell asleep. There were nights where we took shifts, Lauren pumping milk while I rocked Nora in the living room, both of us looking half dead but smiling anyway. I won't lie. There were moments where old patterns started to creep in. One night, maybe 2 weeks in, Lauren got angry because I fell asleep during one of Nora's feedings. She started crying, saying, "You said you'd help." And for a second, I felt that same flicker of defensiveness that started all our problems before. But I stopped myself. I said, "You're right, I messed up. I'll take the next one." It diffused everything instantly. The difference now is that we both know how to pause. We don't let anger run the show anymore. About a month after Nora was born, Lauren told me she finally understood why she'd been so volatile during pregnancy. She said, "I was scared all the time. and I didn't know how to say that without sounding weak, I told her. You were never weak, you were just carrying too much. Then she looked at me and said, so were you. We've kept going to therapy, even with the chaos of a newborn. Our therapist calls it maintenance mode. She says couples don't heal from one big breakthrough. They heal by choosing to keep talking, even when it's inconvenient. That advice has saved us more than once. The best thing that's come out of all of this is how close we've become as a team. We've learned each other's rhythms again. When Nora's crying and we're both exhausted, we fall into this unspoken flow. She changes the diaper, I heat the bottle, she burps the baby, I clean up. It's like watching two people rebuild trust in real time, marking 3 months since the birth. We went for our first family walk around the neighborhood. It was a crisp, sunny afternoon, and Nora was bundled up in her stroller, sleeping like a rock. We didn't talk much, just walked side by side. Then Lauren said, I'm proud of us. I said, me too. There's still tension sometimes. Parenthood doesn't magically erase all the old habits. But now it feels manageable. We've learned that love isn't proven by how calm you stay during chaos, but by how willing you are to come back after you've fallen apart. One night recently, I was rocking Nora to sleep while Lauren dozed on the couch. The house was quiet except for the creak of the chair and the baby's soft breathing. I looked over at Lauren, her hair a mess, dark circles under her eyes, but smiling even in her sleep. And I thought about that night months ago when she left for her mom's, when everything felt like it was falling apart. Now here we were, tired, flawed, and deeply grateful. If you told me then that this is where we'd end up, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But we made it through the worst of ourselves to get here, and somehow, that makes it mean even more. Lauren told me the other day that she doesn't even remember exactly what we were fighting about that night. She said, all I know is that it brought us here. And she's right. This whole experience, pregnancy, parenthood, therapy, learning to forgive each other, has stripped everything down to what actually matters. We're not perfect. We argue sometimes. We mess up, we forget things, but we always circle back. We always choose to try again. That's what I've learned. Real love isn't the absence of conflict. It's the commitment to rebuild every time something breaks. As I'm writing this, Nora's in her crib, the baby monitor humming softly beside me. Lauren's upstairs, finally getting some sleep. The house feels full again, in the best way. We're okay. Better than okay, we're a family now. Stories number 7. My friend said my fiancé only proposed because he's settled, and I lost it on her. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to write something like this. But after everything that happened this weekend, I need to get it off my chest. Maybe it'll help me sort through what I'm feeling. Or maybe I just need to see it in writing to believe it actually happened. I'm 29 and my fiancé Evan is 31. We've been together for 4 years, and he proposed 6 months ago. It wasn't some elaborate staged event. It was quiet, personal, and completely us. We were on a weekend trip to the mountains, sitting by a fire pit, drinking wine, and talking about life when he pulled out the ring. It wasn't flashy, but it felt right. That night is burned into my memory because I'd never felt so sure about anything in my life. The thing is, I wasn't always confident about love. I spent most of my 20s watching relationships fall apart. Mine and other people's. I'd been cheated on before. Ghosted, manipulated, all of it. When I met Evan, I almost didn't believe it could last because it was too calm, too real. But over time, I realized that's what love is supposed to feel like. Steady, not chaotic. So when I told my best friend, Tessa, that Evan had proposed, I expected excitement. We'd been friends since college. 10 years of inside jokes, late-night calls, and surviving the mess of adulthood together. But her reaction was lukewarm. She congratulated me, but it felt forced. Later that night she said, wow, I didn't think Evan was the marrying type. Guess he settled down. I brushed it off. I figured maybe she was surprised or having a bad day, but over the next few months, her comments started to pile up, little things, always disguised as jokes. When I showed her my ring, she said, cute. I thought he'd go for something flashier, though. When we talked about wedding plans, she said, I still can't believe Evan's actually committing. You must have worn him down, and once, during a girls' night after a few drinks, she said in front of everyone, Evan's lucky you were still single. If he'd waited any longer, someone else might have snatched him. Everyone laughed awkwardly. But I felt my face burn. I told myself not to make a scene, not to give her the satisfaction. I convinced myself she didn't mean it the way it sounded. Fast forward to last weekend, my bridesmaids and a few close friends threw a small engagement party at a local wine bar. Nothing huge. Just 20 or so people. Lots of laughter, music, and toasts. Evan was there too, and he was his usual warm, charming self, chatting with everyone, making sure people had drinks, making me feel like the luckiest person in the room. And then Tessa showed up. Late, of course. She walked in wearing this bold red dress and a smirk, like she was stepping into a scene she already knew she'd steal. She hugged me, congratulated Evan, and immediately started telling everyone how she basically introduced us. Something that wasn't true. We met through work, but I didn't call her out. I just smiled and let it go. Then came the moment. Someone, Evan's sister, I think, was giving a toast about how perfect we are together. It was sweet, sentimental, and everyone was clinking glasses. Tessa piped up, laughing loudly, and said, "Yeah, perfect timing too." Evan finally realized no one better was coming along, huh? The whole room went silent. You know that kind of silence that physically hurts? That's what it felt like. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, every eye in the room flicking between me, her, and Evan. Evan looked stunned. His sister looked horrified. And Tessa just sat there, half smiling, waiting for the laughter that didn't come. Something in me just snapped. I stood up and said, "What the hell is wrong with you?" I didn't yell, but my voice was sharp enough that the entire bar seemed to hold its breath. She laughed it off, waving her hand like I was overreacting. "Relax, it's a joke, you know I'm kidding." But I wasn't laughing. I said, "You've been joking about this for months. Tessa, about how I don't deserve him, or how he settled, or how I'm just lucky. You keep saying you're joking, but it feels a lot like you're trying to make me feel small." Her face dropped. She tried to say something, but I kept going. I've tried to ignore it because I thought maybe it was coming from a weird place, or maybe you were jealous or insecure or whatever. But I'm done pretending it's funny. You don't get to humiliate me at my own engagement party. Evan stood up then and put his arm around me, but I could tell he was angry too. He just said, "That wasn't cool." "Tessa," she muttered something about me being too sensitive and grabbed her purse. Before walking out, she said, "Wow, guess marriage made you humorless." Then she left. The silence that followed was brutal. I could feel tears building, but I didn't want to give her the satisfaction. Evan's sister came up and hugged me, whispering, "You didn't do anything wrong." After the party, I cried in the car. Not because of what she said, but because I realized I'd lost something that night. A friendship I'd once thought was unbreakable. Over the next few days, I tried to make sense of it. Tessa didn't reach out. Instead, she made a vague post on Instagram about people who can't take a joke and losing friends to insecurity. A few mutual friends sent it to me, and that's when I decided I was done. I didn't respond, didn't call, didn't try to fix it. I just let her go. I thought maybe she'd realize what she did, maybe apologize, but she never did. Instead, I heard from another friend that she told people she didn't mean it that way, and that I'd always been dramatic. For a while, I felt guilty. I kept replaying that moment, wondering if I'd embarrassed her, if I'd gone too far. But then Evan said something that stuck with me. If she cared about you the way you cared about her, she wouldn't have needed to joke at your expense. And he's right. It's been a few weeks now, and honestly, I feel lighter. Losing Tessa hurts, but it's also a relief. I realize that friendship shouldn't make you question your worth. It shouldn't be conditional or cruel. Sometimes, people can't handle your happiness because it reminds them of their own dissatisfaction. Maybe Tessa couldn't stand seeing me loved in a way she never was. Or maybe she just grew into someone bitter and mean, and I didn't notice until it was too late. Either way, I'm done making excuses for people who hide cruelty behind humor. Evan and I are still planning the wedding, small, intimate, and full of people who genuinely want to be there. When I look at him, I don't see someone who's settled. I see someone who chose me every day, even when life got messy. And if Tessa ever sees this, I hope she understands that sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to a friend isn't insult them. It's pretend your cruelty is love. Update: it's been about 4 months since everything went down at my engagement party, and life has moved forward in ways I didn't expect. Some good, some bittersweet. To start with, no, Tessa and I still haven't spoken. Not a word. I thought maybe after some time passed, she might reach out, or I might feel the urge to. But the truth is, the longer the silence stretched, the less I missed her, and the more I started to see how one-sided our friendship really was. For a while, I'd catch myself drafting messages in my head. You know, the maybe we should talk kind. I'd think about all the memories we shared. Late-night dorm talks, Cheap wine on apartment balconies, crying over our first breakups, dancing barefoot in her kitchen at 2 a.m. We'd been through everything together. How could it end like this? Over one comment, but it wasn't one comment, and that's the part that finally clicked for me. It was years of subtle digs, comparisons, and jokes that always seemed to make her look a little shinier at my expense. Once I stopped seeing her through nostalgia, I started remembering things differently. Like how she'd always roll her eyes when I talked about my job promotions, or how she'd tell mutual friends I was too picky when I was single, or how, when I first started dating Evan, she'd constantly ask, "Are you sure he's as into you as you are into him?" At the time, I thought it was concern. Now, I think it was resentment. The fallout from the engagement party rippled farther than I expected. Some of our mutual friends took sides. Most stayed neutral. But two of them, Jenna and Marcus, quietly reached out to say they'd seen this side of Tessa before. Apparently, she'd made similar jokes about other people's relationships, always pushing the line just far enough to hurt, but never enough to be called out. That actually made me feel better. Not because I wanted to gossip, but because it confirmed I wasn't crazy. Evan, bless him, has been my rock through all of this. He never once pressured me to move on or forgive her. He just let me feel whatever I needed to. A few weeks after the party, he said something that stuck with me. The right people don't make you question whether they respect you. They just show it. He's right, our wedding planning has been, honestly, wonderful. We decided to have it in early spring next year, outdoors at this small vineyard an hour outside the city. It's intimate, romantic, and completely us. We trimmed down the guest list a bit, not out of pettiness, but because we realized we wanted people there who genuinely celebrate our happiness, not compare it to their own. And yeah, Tessa's not invited. That decision was hard for me, not because I wanted her there, but because it made everything so final. I even stared at her name on the spreadsheet for days before deleting it. When I finally did, I sat there and cried, not for losing her, but for realizing I'd held on to the idea of her for way too long. The actual aftermath of the engagement party was messy, at least for a bit. Apparently, after she stormed out, she texted a few mutual friends about how humiliated she felt and how I'd attacked her in public. A couple of people told me she's been saying Evan changed me, like I'm some Stepford version of my old self. That one stung, because if anything, Evan helped me become more myself, not less. But when I really thought about it, I realized that Tessa probably sees any growth as a threat. If I'm happy, if I'm stable, if I'm loved, then she loses that little piece of control she had in our dynamic. The hardest part, though, was realizing she'd been my emotional crutch for so long. I used to tell her everything. Every worry, every fear, every self-doubt. And she'd listen, sure, but she'd also feed it. She never helped me out of my insecurities. She just kept me sitting in them without her voice in my ear. I started hearing my own clearer. I started going to therapy. Not because of her, specifically, but because I realized I had a pattern of letting people like her stick around too long. People who made me feel like I needed to earn love, or prove my worth. My therapist said something that hit me right in the gut. Sometimes we confuse familiarity with safety. You kept her in your life because she felt familiar, not because she made you feel safe. That was it. That summed up a decade of friendship in one sentence. I've also been spending more time with people who do make me feel safe. Jenna, one of the mutual friends who reached out, has honestly become one of my closest friends now, she told me. You don't realize how exhausting it is to constantly defend your own happiness until you finally stop. And she's right. Evan's family has also really stepped up. They treat me like one of their own already. His sister, who was there during that awful moment, told me later she almost said something to Tessa before I did. She said, "You handled that with so much grace. I don't think I could have kept my cool like that." That meant more to me than she knows. The irony is, Tessa's absence made space for better connections. Not just with other people, but with myself. I stopped second-guessing everything I said or worrying how I came across. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years. I even joined a weekend pottery class. Evan jokes that I've turned into the wholesome main character of a Hallmark movie. I tell him he's the handsome love interest who shows up with coffee and bad puns. And honestly, he's not wrong. My life feels lighter now. A few weeks ago, I ran into Tessa for the first time since that night. I was out at a cafe with Jenna, and she walked in with a friend. She froze when she saw me. We made eye contact, and she gave me a small, awkward smile, half apology, half pride. I nodded politely, but I didn't go over. I didn't owe her that. That tiny moment told me everything I needed to know. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. If she ever does reach out someday and genuinely apologizes, I think I could forgive her. Not because she deserves it, but because I've learned that forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of what they did. For now, though, I'm just focusing on the life ahead of me. Evan and I are 2 months away from sending out invitations. We're planning a honeymoon in Maine, and every time I think about it, I feel this quiet, deep sense of peace. Tessa once joked that Evan settled, but when I look at him now, when he looks at me, I know that's not true. He didn't settle, he chose, and so did I. And for the first time in a long time, I finally chose myself too. Update 2. It's been just over a year since I first wrote about that night. My engagement party that went completely sideways. And nearly 6 months since the wedding. So much has changed that it almost feels like another lifetime. Writing this now, married, calmer and clearer than I've ever been, I realize how much that moment with Tessa ended up being a turning point in more ways than one. I'll start with the biggest thing, the wedding. It was perfect. Not flawless, not without hiccups, but perfectly ours. We got married at that small vineyard I mentioned before, surrounded by people who genuinely love us. The weather was the kind of spring day you dream about. Sunny with a soft breeze that made the trees look alive. The ceremony was under an oak arch covered in wildflowers. And Evan's uncle played acoustic guitar as I walked down the aisle. When I locked eyes with Evan, I remember thinking, this is the safest place I've ever been. There were no dramatic speeches, no forced smiles, no people secretly rolling their eyes. Everyone there wanted to be there. That peace was the greatest gift. Tessa wasn't there, of course. By the time the wedding rolled around, I hadn't heard from her in nearly 10 months. But there was a moment that caught me off guard. Just after the ceremony. While Evan and I were taking pictures near the vines, my maid of honor, Jenna, came over with her phone. She said quietly, "I don't want to ruin your moment, but I think you should see this." It was a post from Tessa's Instagram story. A photo of a wine glass with a caption that said, "When your ex-friend gets married and you can't help but wonder how long before the cracks show." I just stared at it for a second. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. It was just this dull, distant ache. A year ago, something like that would have broken me. But that day, I just handed the phone back to Jenna and said, "She's still stuck in the same place. Let her be." And that's when I realized I'd truly moved on. She was still living in bitterness, and I was standing in a field surrounded by love. We weren't even in the same story anymore. The wedding went on beautifully. My dad's speech made everyone cry. Evan's sister danced with me to an old folk song. And at the end of the night, as we drove away with the windows down and the stars overhead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Completeness. The next few months were a blur of real life. Honeymoon in Maine, getting back to work, finding a rhythm as newlyweds. Evan and I have settled into a quiet, happy domesticity. He still leaves me sticky notes on the fridge, and I still can't cook rice properly. But we laugh about it instead of stressing. And yet, as much as I moved on from Tessa, she still found small ways to remind me she existed. A few weeks after the wedding, she reached out, not a full apology, just a short message. "Hey, saw your photos? You looked beautiful. Hope you're happy." I didn't know what to do with that. It wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. It felt like someone trying to open a door halfway just to prove they could. I showed Evan the message, and he just said, "You don't owe her anything, not even closure." He was right. I didn't reply, but later, I thought about it a lot. Why she couldn't just say sorry. Why she couldn't acknowledge the way she hurt me. Maybe for her, admitting she crossed a line would mean facing a version of herself she's not ready to see. I've come to terms with that. Some people never say sorry, and that's their burden to carry, not yours. A few months after that, I ran into her again. Pure coincidence. At a bookstore downtown, I was in the travel section. She was by the registers. When she noticed me, there was that awkward pause. The split second where two people decide if they'll pretend not to see each other or face it head on. She walked over. We exchanged small talk. How's work? How's life? All that surface-level nonsense that people use to fill silence when there's too much unsaid beneath it. She didn't mention the wedding, or what happened before, or anything about that night. But as we were wrapping up, she said, "I really am happy for you. You always wanted this." And something in her tone sounded genuine. I nodded, thanked her, and wished her well. That was it. No big reconciliation. No dramatic apology, no tearful hug. Just two people who used to know each other better than anyone, standing in a bookstore. quietly acknowledging the ghosts between them. When I walked out, I didn't feel heavy or angry. I felt free. Evan and I joke sometimes that she accidentally did us a favor. Her settled comment made me appreciate him more deeply than ever. Because love isn't about settling. It's about choosing. Every single day, even when it's imperfect. And he chooses me, flaws and all, without hesitation. Since then, life has only gotten better. I got promoted at work. We bought a little fixer-upper house on the edge of town. It's nothing fancy, but it has character, and a creaky front porch where we sit on Sunday mornings with coffee. There's a lemon tree in the backyard, and Evan swears he's going to learn how to make homemade lemonade. Spoiler, he won't. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about how different my life feels now. Not because I got married or bought a house, but because I finally stopped chasing people who made me question my worth. When you spend years letting someone like Tessa chip away at your confidence, you start to believe you deserve less. But when you finally step away from that, the whole world looks brighter. A couple weeks ago, Jenna and I were out for brunch, and she asked, if Tessa ever did reach out again and really apologized, like sincerely, what would you do? I thought about it for a long time. I told her I'd forgive her, but I wouldn't let her back in. Because forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door. Sometimes it just means putting down the baggage and walking away lighter. If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that friendship breakups can hurt just as much as romantic ones, sometimes even more. But they can also teach you the most valuable lesson of all, that peace is better than people who drain it from you. Tessa will probably always exist somewhere in my story, like a footnote in a chapter I've already finished, and that's okay. Not every person is meant to stay for the whole book. The other day, Evan and I were sitting on that creaky porch, talking about how far we've come. He smiled at me and said, you know what's funny? Every time I think about that night, I don't think about her or what she said. I just think about how you stood up for yourself. That's when it hit me. What felt like a humiliating moment at the time was actually the start of me reclaiming my voice. So yeah, maybe I did snap that night, but honestly, that was the first night I stopped apologizing for taking up space in my own happiness. And looking back now, I wouldn't change a thing. Update 3. It's been nearly 2 years since that engagement party fiasco. And looking back now, I realize that snapping at Tessa was a turning point. Not just for my friendships, but for my life in general. At the time, it felt like the worst thing I'd ever done. I kept replaying it in my head, thinking about how I'd embarrassed her, how everyone had witnessed it, and how it might have changed the way our mutual friends viewed me. But as time went on, I started to see it differently. First, the most obvious change, my marriage with Evan. We're happier than I ever imagined. Planning a wedding with someone you love deeply is stressful, but it also solidified something I didn't know I needed. Confidence in our partnership. The wedding itself was small, intimate, and completely personal. We even opted for handwritten vows, which left both of us crying and laughing simultaneously. Seeing Evan promise to choose me every day in front of everyone reminded me that love isn't about who's better, smarter, or more impressive. It's about commitment, respect, and choosing one another, no matter what. Tessa's absence became a blessing in disguise. Without her constant jokes and subtle digs, I realized how much energy I'd wasted over the years trying to appease her, explain myself, or reinterpret her barbed humor as harmless teasing. I started to focus on relationships that uplifted me instead of ones that drained me. Evan has always been supportive, but now I actively surround myself with friends who encourage me to grow and celebrate my achievements instead of undermining them. The first real test of this newfound mindset came about 6 months after the wedding. Tessa texted me out of the blue, something I never expected. I've been thinking, maybe I was wrong, congrats again. It was brief, vague, and unconvincing. But I didn't feel the need to respond. For the first time, I realized I didn't need her validation. My life wasn't missing her approval, and my happiness wasn't contingent on it. Evan noticed my calm reaction and smiled knowingly, saying, "See, you've grown past this." And he was right. Even more surprising, our mutual friends adapted too. Some who had quietly been on Tessa's side began to see the truth. They watched her pattern of subtle digs and manipulations over the years, and many quietly reached out to apologize for not noticing it sooner. That was healing in its own way. I realized that sometimes the people around us need space to see clearly, but you can't wait for them to change your reality. You have to step into it yourself. Work has been flourishing as well. I used to hesitate promoting myself or speaking up in meetings because of the lingering fear of judgment, a fear that Tessa only reinforced. Now I advocate for myself, lead projects with confidence, and even mentor younger colleagues without second-guessing whether I'm being too assertive. The boost in my career is a direct reflection of the confidence I reclaimed by standing up to Tessa and, more importantly, by realizing my worth. Evan and I also started volunteering at a local community center. Teaching kids about creative writing and storytelling has been unexpectedly therapeutic. It's humbling and energizing at the same time, and it's a reminder that life is bigger than one toxic friendship or a single humiliating moment. There's space for joy, impact, and growth everywhere. You just have to be willing to step into it. As for Tessa, she still occasionally posts on social media, sometimes making passive-aggressive comments about friendships, happiness, or success. But I scroll past now, unbothered. I don't replay her words in my mind. I don't let her affect my mood. Her opinions have lost their power. Honestly, the scariest part of that engagement party wasn't her comment. It was realizing how much I'd allowed myself to internalize someone else's toxicity over the years. But now I know I'm stronger than that. I trust my instincts, I trust my worth, and I trust the people I allow into my life. And for the first time in a long time, I'm living a life free from the shadows of someone else's judgment. Evan and I talk often about how different life feels now compared to 2 years ago. We joke about how, if Tessa had been nicer, I might still be second-guessing myself, still over-explaining every decision, but instead I snapped. I drew a line, and I reclaimed myself. That night was painful, yes, but it was also the beginning of a chapter I'm proud of. So, if there's one lesson I've learned through all of this, it's that sometimes snapping or standing up for yourself doesn't ruin relationships. It protects them, protects you from people who don't have your best interests at heart, protects the happiness you've earned. And sometimes, it's the only way to finally make room for the love, the friendships, and the life you truly deserve. Evan and I are happier, stronger, and closer than ever. We have big plans for the future, traveling, adopting a dog, maybe even buying a house that's just ours. And every day, I wake up grateful that I no longer feel the weight of someone else's insecurity on my shoulders. Life is messy, people are flawed, but boundaries, self-respect, and love make the chaos manageable, and for me, that's enough. Final update. It's been almost 3 years since that engagement party incident with Tessa, and I can honestly say my life feels unrecognizable from the chaos of that night. But in the best way possible. When I look back, I realize that snapping at her was more than just a moment of frustration. It was a turning point that reshaped how I see myself, my relationships, and what I will accept in my life. Evan and I are thriving. Married life has settled into a rhythm that feels effortless, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. We've learned how to argue without tearing each other down, how to communicate without fear, and how to support each other's growth. We even renovated a small part of our home into a little studio where I can paint, and Evan can work on his woodworking projects. It's a sanctuary we both need, and it's a reminder that building a life together is as much about creating personal space as it is about shared experiences. Tessa? I haven't spoken to her in over 2 years. She occasionally pops up on social media, usually in the form of passive-aggressive posts about friendship, happiness, or success. But they don't touch me anymore. For the first time, I scroll past without a second thought. I've realized that the power she once had over me wasn't about her. It was about the space I allowed her to occupy in my mind. Once I reclaimed that space, I didn't need her anymore. Some of our mutual friends drifted away at first, unsure of which side to take, but most have returned. They've seen the change in me, and in Evan, and they respect the boundary I drew. And that's the other thing I've learned. People who truly value you will adjust to your boundaries. Those who don't aren't worth the energy. A few months ago, I received a message from a friend I hadn't heard from in a while. I saw Tessa mention your wedding photos again. I just wanted you to know, you're inspiring. It's amazing to see how happy you are. Don't let anyone take that from you. It was a simple message, but it confirmed something I've known for a while now. Happiness is contagious, but only if you protect it fiercely. Even my career has flourished. I've been promoted twice in the last 2 years. And I credit a lot of that confidence to the moment I snapped at Tessa. It taught me that standing up for myself wasn't just about her. It was about claiming my worth in every area of my life. I no longer shrink to fit someone else's expectations. I speak up, I take risks, and I pursue opportunities without hesitation. Evan and I also volunteer at a local community center with a writing program for kids. Teaching them to tell their stories has reminded me that we all have voices, and it's our job to protect them. It's fulfilling in a way I never expected, and it reminds me daily that life is bigger than any single toxic relationship. The biggest change, though, has been within myself. I feel lighter, freer, and more confident than I ever have. I no longer replay old insults or question my worth. I don't look for validation from people who don't have my best interests at heart. And when I think about Tessa, it's no longer with anger or sadness. It's with clarity. She was a chapter I had to close in order to write the story I wanted for myself. Evan and I joke about it sometimes. He calls her the phantom ex-friend, and I laugh because it's true. Her influence in my life is gone, but her absence has made room for everything else: love, growth, and genuine friendship. So, if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that boundaries, self-respect, and standing up for yourself aren't just acts of defiance, they're acts of self-love. They make room for better relationships, healthier environments, and a life where happiness isn't negotiated or contingent on someone else's approval. Looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. Snapping at Tessa wasn't just justified, it was necessary. It was the catalyst that allowed me to protect my peace, embrace my worth, and fully step into the life I've always wanted with Evan. Now, when I think about that engagement party, I don't feel embarrassment or resentment. I feel gratitude for the clarity, for the growth, and for the love that came out stronger on the other side. Life is imperfect, people are flawed, but if you protect your happiness, nurture the right relationships, and stand up for yourself, everything else falls into place. And for me, that's exactly where I'm meant to be. Stories number 8. My shower schedule turned my apartment into a war zone. I honestly never thought I'd end up on Reddit to talk about shower habits. But here we are. I 27F rent an apartment with 2 other people, and what started as a completely normal routine somehow spiraled into an all-out Cold War over me taking a shower at 7:30 every morning. A little context first. I live in Portland, Oregon, in one of those old craftsman houses that's been split into 3 separate apartments. My unit is upstairs and has 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a tiny kitchen. I share it with 2 roommates, Emma 26F and Chris 28M. We met on a roommate matching app about a year ago. None of us were close friends, but we clicked well enough in the beginning. Shared rent, kept things tidy, and occasionally watched bad reality TV together after work. Everything was fine until about 4 months ago, when I started a new job that required me to be in the office by 8:30 a.m. sharp. It's about a 35-minute drive, so I have to get up at 6:45, make coffee, and shower at 7:30 on the dot to stay on schedule. It's not negotiable. I have to be out the door by 8 so. At first, nobody said anything. Then one morning, Emma knocked on the bathroom door while I was mid-shampoo and yelled, "Can you please hurry up?" I thought maybe she was late for something, so I wrapped it up in like 2 minutes. When I came out, she gave me this look and said, "Do you have to shower right at 7:30 every day?" I said, "Yeah, that's when I get ready for work." She sighed dramatically and said, "It's just, that's when I do my meditation and journaling, and the sound of the water totally ruins it." I didn't even know what to say. Meditation and journaling. At 7:30 in the morning? In the kitchen? Yes, she does it at the kitchen table, with incense. I apologized and said I couldn't change my time, but I'd try to be quick. I figured that was the end of it. Spoiler, it wasn't. A few days later, I noticed the hot water kept fluctuating weirdly during my showers, like, it would go icy cold for a second, then scalding hot. I thought maybe it was just old pipes. But then Chris mentioned at dinner that someone was running the kitchen sink while I was in the shower. For fun, I laughed, but he didn't. He looked at Emma. She rolled her eyes and said, "It's not for fun. I'm just trying to make her aware of how disruptive it is." I was floored. She was literally trying to mess with the water to make a point. So I told her, as calmly as I could, that I pay rent just like she does, and I'm allowed to shower at a reasonable hour. She muttered something about courtesy and mindfulness of shared space, then stormed off to her room and slammed the door. From then on, things got passive-aggressive. My shampoo bottles started disappearing. The bathroom mirror was fogged with messages, like maybe try showering later, written in the condensation once. I even found a sticky note on my towel that said, "You're not the only one who lives here." It was ridiculous. I tried to stay civil, but one morning I snapped. She banged on the bathroom door again and yelled, "Some of us work from home, you know," and I yelled back, Some of us have to shower before we work. That was the day she declared house rules. She printed out a passive-aggressive list taped to the fridge. Morning quiet hours, 7 out of 8. AM respect communal peace. Showers Mars, after 8 m unless urgent. Chris and I just looked at each other like, is she serious? I ripped it down and told her unless she's my landlord, she doesn't get to make rules like that. The next few weeks were tense. She'd sigh loudly whenever I walked toward the bathroom. She started using noise-canceling headphones during breakfast, but made sure to look miserable doing it. Then, one morning, I came out of the shower to find that the breaker had tripped. My hairdryer wouldn't work. When I went to the panel to check it, someone had stuck a label on the switch that said, 7:30 horrors, off limits. I was so mad I took a picture and sent it to our group chat with, "This is harassment, stop." Chris finally chimed in and said, "Yeah, this has gone too far. Let her shower in peace." That same night, Emma sent this long paragraph about energy flow and how water usage disrupts her mental and emotional equilibrium during her morning manifestation practice. I had to read it twice because I thought it was a joke. I told her that unless she was planning to move out, she'd have to adjust. It's not like I'm taking showers at midnight or blasting music. It's a 10-minute shower. The next day, she ignored me completely. For like 2 weeks straight. She wouldn't speak to me unless absolutely necessary. But the weirdest part? She started showering right after me. Like, exactly when I finished. I think it was her way of reclaiming the bathroom or something. Anyway, things got bad enough that Chris suggested we have a roommate mediation over coffee one Sunday. I agreed, though I didn't have much hope. We sat at the kitchen table, me, Chris, and Emma. And he started by saying we all needed to reset the vibe. Emma launched into this long speech about how she felt disrespected and how my shower violates the sanctity of morning peace. I said, "You know what else violates peace? Having to tiptoe around in my own apartment because you've decided water is emotionally offensive." Chris was trying so hard not to laugh. He kept saying things like, "Let's focus on solutions," but it was obvious he thought she was being absurd. Finally, I told her if she kept interfering with the water or the power, I'd talk to the landlord. That shut her up a week later. She sent me a text that said, "I'm going to start showering at night. Please continue with your schedule." I think she realized she was losing the battle and decided to retreat gracefully. It's been about 2 months since that truce, and things have settled down. We're polite again, but definitely not friends. She's been hinting about maybe moving in with her boyfriend soon, which honestly can't come fast enough. Chris and I joke about it now. He'll say, "Time for the sacred morning ritual." Every time I turn on the shower, sometimes I still can't believe I went through all that over something so basic. I get it. Living with people is hard. Everyone's routines clash. But asking someone to skip their morning shower because it disrupts your aura, that's next level. If anything, this whole mess taught me to never move in with someone who describes themselves as spiritually sensitive on a roommate app. It's code for we'll turn everyday life into an emotional trial. Anyway, I still take my 7:30 shower every day. With pride. The water pressure sucks. The bathroom's tiny, and the tiles are cracked. But that 10 minutes of hot water? It's the only peaceful part of my morning, and no one's taking that from me again. Update. It's been about 6 months since I posted about my morning shower drama, and I honestly thought the story was over. Turns out, I underestimated how deeply one person's resentment over plumbing could run. So yeah, Emma didn't move out when she said she might. Her boyfriend, let's call him Tyler, broke up with her 2 weeks after my original post went live. She decided to focus on herself, which in her words, meant reclaiming the serenity of shared spaces. Translation, doubling down on her crusade to control the apartment's energy flow. After that, things got weird again, but in a quieter, more insidious way. It started with small inconveniences. I'd get in the shower and realize my shampoo was diluted, like someone had poured water into the bottle. Then one day my towel was soaked before I even used it. I thought maybe Chris had accidentally splashed water from the sink. But when I mentioned it, he looked genuinely confused. That's when I noticed Emma smirking from her room. I confronted her, calmly, at first, and asked if she was touching my stuff. She went on this long tangent about shared airspace and how energy ownership doesn't exist in communal environments. I told her she could keep her energy, but if she touched my towel again, I'd file a complaint with our landlord. For the record, I hate confrontation. I'm not some dramatic roommate who thrives on chaos. I'm a quiet person who just wants to get ready for work without feeling like I'm starring in a low-budget psychological thriller about shower time. After that argument, she went totally silent. For weeks. No passive-aggressive notes. No sighing. Nothing. I actually thought, maybe she's letting it go. Then one night, around 11:45 p.m., I heard this loud thunk in the bathroom. I opened my door and saw light coming from under the bathroom door. I waited a minute, then another. It wasn't until midnight that she came out, in a towel, dripping wet, hair wrapped up, and saw me standing there. She looked startled for a second, then said, "I thought I'd try showering at night like you wanted." I said, "That's fine, but could you not do it at midnight? The pipes are ancient. I can hear every sound through the walls." Her expression changed completely. Her mouth tightened, and she said, "I can't believe you're still trying to control how I shower." Then she stormed past me and slammed her door. I stood there, speechless. I didn't know if I should laugh or cry. Over the next week, she started showering at random hours. 3 p.m., 9:45 p.m., 6 a.m., once at 2 in the morning. It was like she was trying to prove a point, that I wasn't the boss of her water usage. The kicker? She started taking longer showers, like 40 minutes each time. Chris was losing his mind too. He's a nurse and works night shifts sometimes. So he'd come home at 6 a.m. and just want to sleep, only to hear the pipes rattling from Emma's empowerment showers. Finally, he texted me one morning. "We need to do something before she floods the bathroom out of spite." We decided to talk to our landlord, an older guy named Howard who lives downstairs. Howard's chill, but he's also one of those people who thinks roommate disputes should work themselves out. When we explained everything, he looked like he was trying not to laugh. "So, she's upset because you shower at a normal time, and now she's retaliating by showering too much?" he asked, basically, I said. He sighed and said, "You're all adults. I'll talk to her, but I can't exactly police shower schedules." 2 days later, he put a polite but firm notice on our fridge. "Please be mindful of water usage and noise levels. Excessive use will be billed accordingly." Thanks, Howard. It didn't mention names, but the message was clear. For about a week after that, everything was weirdly calm. She stopped showering at weird hours. She even started making small talk again, like asking if I wanted coffee or if I'd seen her missing mug. I thought maybe Howard's warning had gotten through to her. Then one morning, I walked into the bathroom and immediately slipped. My foot landed in a puddle, not from the shower, but from the sink which was running. The drain was plugged, and water had overflowed onto the floor. I turned it off and grabbed towels to soak it up, cursing under my breath. I thought maybe it was an accident, until I saw the mirror. Someone had written in soap, "Enjoy your morning routine." That was it. I lost it. I took photos. The water, the message, everything, and sent them straight to Howard with the subject line, "Bathroom sabotage." I don't even know what kind of person writes a passive-aggressive threat in Dove body wash. But I was done pretending this was quirky roommate drama. Howard called me 20 minutes later. "That's not acceptable," he said. "I'll handle it." He came up that afternoon while I was at work. When I got home, Emma's door was open, and she was sitting on her bed crying. I froze in the hallway. Chris whispered that Howard had given her a formal warning. If anything like that happened again, she'd be evicted. That was 3 months ago. Since then, she's been eerily quiet, like she's actively trying to erase the chaos she caused. She still meditates, still journals, but she does it in her room now. Not the kitchen. She showers at night, quietly. No more games. A few weeks ago, she actually apologized out of nowhere. She knocked on my door and said, "Hey, I wanted to say sorry. I wasn't in a good headspace, and I took it out on you." It wasn't about the shower. It was about me feeling like I didn't have control over anything. I was stunned. I told her I appreciated it, and that I didn't want things to be hostile anymore. Now we coexist. We're not friends, but we're civil. She even gave me a candle as a peace offering. Sandalwood and vanilla, with a little card that said, "Peaceful mornings." I laughed. But it was genuinely thoughtful. Chris jokes that our apartment went from a battlefield to a truce zone. He says I should light the candle every morning as a symbol of victory. The whole situation still feels surreal. Who would have thought a simple shower schedule could unravel someone's entire sense of balance? Looking back, I think Emma was struggling with more than just morning serenity. She'd just gone through a breakup, was working remotely in a job she hated, and was probably lonely. My consistent routine probably reminded her of everything that felt chaotic in her life. It doesn't excuse how she acted, but it makes a little more sense now. So yeah, the bathroom war is officially over. The 7:30 showers continue, The hot water still sputters sometimes, the tiles still leak, and the mirror still fogs up, but now it's quiet, peaceful even, and for once, the only thing in the mirror is me brushing my teeth. Not soap messages from the abyss. Update 2. It's been almost another full year since I last wrote about the Great Shower War. And even though I thought that saga was over, life decided to squeeze one more round of weirdness out of it. Except this time, it didn't end in soap messages or flooded bathrooms. It ended with something unexpectedly human. So after my last update, things had been calm for months. Like eerily calm, Emma was civil. Chris and I were thriving as roommates. And for the first time since moving in, I actually started liking the apartment. I even redecorated the bathroom. New shower curtain, eucalyptus plant, matching towels. It felt like I'd reclaimed that space. Then, early this spring, Emma told us she was officially moving out. She said she'd found a studio across town closer to her yoga studio and a better fit for her morning energy cycles. I smiled politely and helped her carry boxes to her car, secretly thrilled to be free of her spiritual shower policing once and for all. For about 3 glorious weeks after she left, it was just me and Chris. It was bliss. We'd make breakfast together, leave the bathroom door open while brushing teeth, blast music during morning showers, pure freedom. But peace never lasts long in shared housing. Our landlord Howard texted us in late April. New tenant moving in June 1st. Her name's Natalie. I didn't think much of it. I've lived with enough random people that I've stopped expecting anything. But when Natalie moved in, I realized the universe has a twisted sense of humor, because she was Emma 2.0, except louder, friendlier, and with a whiteboard for intentions. At first, I thought it was fine. Natalie 29F was cheerful, clean, and worked at a local marketing agency. She seemed normal. But on her second day, she stood in the hallway while I was drying my hair and asked, "Hey, are you the one who showers at 7:30 every day?" I froze. Yeah?" She smiled. "Perfect. I get up around then too. Just wanted to make sure I can squeeze mine in right after you. I hate cold water." That sounded reasonable at first, but then she started literally waiting outside the bathroom door every morning. Like clockwork, I'd turn off the shower, open the door, and she'd be standing there in her robe, holding a towel, saying, "Tag, you're it." At first I thought it was just quirky, but soon she started knocking on the door if I went over my usual 10 minutes. "Hey, just checking. How much longer?" She'd call cheerfully through the steam. I'd always hated confrontation, but I could feel my blood pressure rising every time I heard that knock. It was déjà vu in the worst way. Then she started commenting on my shower habits. "You must use a ton of conditioner," she'd say. "The drain gets clogged so fast." Or, "You know, if you showered at night, you'd probably sleep better." It was like history repeating itself. But instead of passive-aggressive spiritual warfare, it was friendly micromanagement. Chris noticed too. He joked, "Did the apartment come with a curse? Like whoever moves into the second bedroom becomes obsessed with your shower schedule?" Honestly, it was starting to feel that way. The breaking point came on a random Tuesday in July. I was running late. My boss had scheduled a surprise morning meeting, so I jumped in the shower around 7:15 instead of 7:30. I figured 15 minutes wouldn't kill anyone. When I came out, Natalie was standing in the hallway with her towel. Arms crossed. "You changed your time," she said flatly. I blinked at her. "Yeah, I have an early meeting," she sighed, muttering something like, "I just wish we could coordinate better." That night, I decided to set the record straight. Over dinner, I told her, as nicely as I could, that I have a set morning routine, and I'm not changing it to accommodate anyone. She nodded, said she totally understood, and then casually asked if we could alternate shower days to minimize water strain. I almost choked on my pasta. Alternate shower days? Like what? I shower Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and she gets Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday? Was this a rental or a boarding school? I said no. She smiled, but it was tight. The kind of smile that says, "This isn't over." Sure enough, the next morning, I turned on the shower and instantly got hit with freezing water. I thought maybe the heater broke again, until I heard her in the kitchen, running the sink. It was Emma all over again. I stormed out in a towel, dripping wet, and said, "Are you seriously doing this right now?" She looked genuinely confused. "Doing what?" "You're running the sink while I'm in the shower," she blinked. Oh my God, no. I was just rinsing my smoothie cup. I didn't know whether to believe her. But at that point, I was too cold and too tired to argue. Chris, bless him, stepped in later that day. He sent a group text saying, "For the love of God, Can we just let each other shower in peace? And added a shower emoji. Natalie replied with a thumbs up and a haha sure thing. But then it stopped. No more comments, no more waiting at the door, no more running water, just quiet. Fast forward a few months. And here's the twist I didn't see coming. In late September, Natalie invited me and Chris to her birthday dinner. I almost said no, but Chris convinced me to go, over margaritas. Natalie got tipsy and started giggling about how she'd been terrified to live here at first, because the landlord had told her the last tenant left after some kind of bathroom drama. She said, "I didn't know what that meant, but when I realized you were the 7:30 shower girl, I was like, oh my God, it's her, apparently." Howard had mentioned me by name, saying, "She's punctual. Just don't mess with her shower time." I almost spit out my drink. So that's why she'd been so weird about the schedule. She'd been trying to avoid becoming another Emma situation. We all laughed so hard about it that I cried. Natalie admitted she'd been anxious about being the next problem roommate, and thought she had to follow my schedule to keep the peace. Now, months later, we're actually friends. Like genuine friends, we cook together, we've gone on hikes, and she even joins my morning routine now. She makes coffee while I shower, and we talk about work and life through the door like it's some kind of sitcom. We've even developed a running joke. Whenever someone mentions water pressure, Chris says, "Careful, don't trigger the shower truce." The wildest part? Emma texted me out of the blue last month. She's doing therapy, started teaching yoga full-time, and actually thanked me for helping her recognize patterns of control. She said she read a book about shared living dynamics and realized she'd been projecting. She ended the message with, "I hope your mornings are peaceful now. You deserve them." For the first time, they are. No soap messages, no broken breakers, no passive-aggressive sighs, just me, the hum of the pipes, and the smell of eucalyptus hanging from the shower head. It's funny. Something as small as a shower schedule taught me more about communication, boundaries, and human weirdness than any friendship ever has. And honestly, if that's the strangest hill I ever die on, I'll take it. Because at least I'm clean. Update 3. I can't believe I'm writing about this again. But apparently, the universe just refuses to let me have a normal, uneventful bathroom routine. The Great Shower Saga has somehow evolved yet again. Only this time, it didn't happen inside our apartment. It happened outside of it. Let me back up. It's been about a year and a half since the first shower war started. And for the first time in ages, everything had been peaceful. Natalie and I had settled into an easy rhythm. She'd make her morning smoothie while I showered. We'd chat about work gossip or random podcasts. And then Chris would stumble in around 8,000, still half asleep, asking if anyone had seen his scrubs. It was domestic, borderline sitcom-level harmony. So when our landlord Howard texted us that he was selling the house, it felt like the end of an era. We'd have 3 months to move. Natalie found a cute loft downtown. Chris planned to move in with his girlfriend. And I, ever the creature of habit, decided to get a 1-bedroom apartment closer to work. My new place was small, quiet, and blessedly private. No roommates. No one to glare at me through incense smoke. No one to tag in for the shower. Just me, my cat Milo, and a perfectly functioning bathroom. For the first few weeks, I was in heaven. I even started romanticizing my mornings, lighting a candle, making pour-over coffee, showering at exactly 7:30 with music playing. I swear, I could feel my blood pressure drop 10 points every time the hot water hit my shoulders. Then one morning, I heard a knock on my door. It was around 8:15. I opened it to find my downstairs neighbor, a middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard and a hoodie that said, "World's okayest dad." His name was Dennis. I'd said hi to him a couple times in the hallway. Nothing more. He smiled, polite but stiff, and said, "Hey there, sorry to bother you. I just wanted to ask, are you the one who showers every morning around 7:30? I swear, I felt my soul leave my body. I blinked and said, yeah, I guess that's me." He chuckled awkwardly and said, "Yeah, it's just, your pipes run right above my bedroom and it's pretty loud. Any chance you could do it a little later?" It took everything in me not to laugh out loud. Of course the pipes were loud. Of course he could hear it. Of course the universe would place me directly above another person sensitive to morning showers. I apologized, said I'd try to be quick, and closed the door. For a moment I just stood there, staring at my reflection in the hallway mirror, thinking, is this my curse? Am I destined to annoy someone with personal hygiene for the rest of my life? I tried compromising. I showered at 7:15 one day, 7:45 the next, even tried at 8,000 once. Every time, like clockwork, Dennis would find a reason to mention it. Hey, heard you getting ready early today. Or, you must be running late, huh? Always with that too friendly tone that made it sound like small talk, but felt like judgment. It became this unspoken morning standoff. I started tiptoeing around my own apartment again, careful not to drop the shampoo bottle, turning down the music, even timing my blow-dryer like a burglar planning a heist. Then one morning, I decided I was done. I was tired of rearranging my life for people's noise sensitivities. I'd been nothing but considerate. So, at 7:30 sharp, I turned on the shower. Full blast. 2 minutes in, I heard a faint thunk below me, like someone hitting the ceiling with a broom handle. Dennis had literally banged on his ceiling. That's when I snapped. I threw on a towel, marched downstairs, and knocked on his door. He opened it, looking startled, and I said, "Hi, I just wanted to let you know the shower sound you're hearing. That's the sound of me paying rent, every month on time." He blinked at me, mouth open, and then said, "Well, you don't have to be rude." I said, "I've lived with people who tried to control when I shower. I'm not doing it again." Then I turned around and walked back upstairs, dripping wet, half amused and half shaking from adrenaline. A few days later, I got a note slipped under my door. "Hey, sorry about earlier. I'm just a light sleeper." Didn't mean to make things tense. I didn't respond. But I did bake banana bread and left a slice on a paper plate outside his door. No note, just a peace offering after that. He never mentioned the shower again. Actually, over time, we became oddly friendly. We'd see each other in the hallway, and he'd joke, "So 7:30 sharp again?" And I'd say, "You know it," and we'd both laugh. Turns out, he works night shifts at a printing company, and was just adjusting his sleep schedule when I moved in. Once his hours shifted, he stopped even noticing. But the story doesn't end there. A couple of months ago, I was walking home from work, and ran into someone I didn't expect to ever see again. Emma. She was sitting outside a coffee shop, typing on her laptop, hair shorter now, wearing a denim jacket instead of flowy linen. She saw me before I could duck away, and her face lit up. We ended up grabbing coffee together. It wasn't awkward, just surreal. She told me she's been teaching mindfulness classes and working on a book about intentional living. I wanted to roll my eyes, but she seemed grounded softer. She said, "I think about that whole shower thing sometimes. I was so wrapped up in control that I forgot people have lives outside of my need for silence." I laughed. "I think about it too. I've had sequels." When I told her about Natalie and then Dennis, she burst out laughing. "You're cursed," she said. "The universe is teaching you patience through plumbing." We ended up talking for almost 2 hours. By the time we said goodbye, she hugged me and said, "I'm really glad you didn't change who you are just to make people comfortable." And that line stuck with me, because she's right. For so long, I kept trying to shrink myself down. Be quieter, softer, less inconvenient. But at the end of the day, taking a shower at a reasonable time isn't selfish, it's just normal life. Now, I still shower every morning at 7:30. Sometimes I think about all the chaos it caused and can't help but laugh. There's something kind of poetic about it. How something as ordinary as hot water and soap became a years-long lesson in boundaries, patience, and the absurdity of human coexistence. The funny thing is, whenever I have friends over and they use my bathroom, they always come out saying, "Wow, you've got great water pressure." And I just smile and say, "You have no idea what that's worth." Final update. All right, buckle up. Because apparently my shower saga refuses to die quietly. But this is truly the final chapter. The one where I can finally say, I've reached peak peace, and my mornings are mine again. No soap notes. No passive-aggressive roommate games. No piping disputes. No universal conspiracies against my 7:30 a.m. shower. After Dennis and I established our unspoken truce, I settled into a routine I could finally enjoy. No knocking, no judging eyes, no staring through the steam like a sentient ghost of past roommates. Every morning felt like a small victory. The hot water flowed perfectly. Milo the cat stared judgmentally from the windowsill as I sang off-key to my favorite playlist, and the eucalyptus candle I'd hung in the corner filled the bathroom with a faintly sweet aroma. It was serene, perfect mine. Then one day, Natalie sent me a text. She's now fully settled into her loft and had invited me and Chris for dinner. We joked about our past shower wars, laughed over wine, and she said something that honestly made me choke up a little. "I think because of you, I learned how to speak up for myself without freaking out. I used to be terrified of confrontation now. I can tell people what I need without a whole dramatic saga." I realized right then that all the absurdity, the passive-aggressive notes, the freezer-cold water sabotage, and even Emma's spiritual tirades had been lessons in boundaries. I had learned to communicate, defend my space, and hold my ground while still being considerate. In short, I had grown. Chris and I, of course, celebrated quietly in our apartment. He said, "You know, it's kind of amazing. You turned a daily routine into a life lesson. Most people pay thousands for that kind of growth in therapy," I laughed. But he wasn't wrong. And Emma, she reached out again recently. She said she's been doing really well teaching yoga, traveling, and writing her book on mindfulness. She even admitted, "I was ridiculous back then. I see that now. Thanks for being patient." Even when I wasn't, I never expected gratitude from someone who once declared war over shower times. But here it was. Full circle. For me, the final victory wasn't just having the freedom to shower at 7:30 without interference. It was understanding that boundaries, communication, and a little assertiveness could turn chaos into growth. My mornings are calm, my space is respected, and my sanity intact. Sometimes I even think about how absurd it all was. The sticky notes, the cold water, the whispered complaints. It's funny to reflect on it now because every conflict, every battle over tiny water droplets taught me more about people, relationships, and myself than I could have imagined. So, yes, I still shower at 7:30 sharp. Milo judges me. I hum obnoxiously, and the eucalyptus candle burns faithfully. But the water no longer carries tension. The walls no longer echo with resentment. And my apartment is finally the sanctuary it was meant to be. To anyone out there who feels like they're constantly bending over backward for roommates, co-workers, or family, stand your ground, set your boundaries. You don't need to apologize for living your life the way you need to live it. And yes, sometimes a hot shower at the perfect time is revolutionary. I've learned the hard way that small acts of self-respect can ripple outward in ways you never expect. The shower war is over. The peace is mine. And I've never felt cleaner. In body and spirit. Stories number 9. My boss wants me to pay $3,500 after I accidentally backed into the company's garage door. I work for a small HVAC company in Ohio. We're not a big corporation or anything. Just a dozen guys, a couple of vans, and one office tucked behind a strip mall. I've been there almost 4 years. And up until last month, I actually liked the job. My boss, Craig, could be gruff, but he was fair, or so I thought. It happened on a Wednesday morning. Around 7:30, I was in one of the company vans, getting ready to head out to a service call. It had been a hectic morning. One of the other techs called in sick, and we were scrambling to rearrange the schedule. I loaded the last of my tools, hopped in the van, and started backing out of the garage. Here's the thing. The garage door was one of those older manual ones. You had to hold the button on the wall until it went all the way up, because if you let go too soon, it would stop halfway. Normally, I'd double-check it was clear before backing up. But that morning, I assumed it was all the way open. I glanced in the rear view, saw daylight, and started backing out slowly. Then I heard the crunch. That sound still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. I hit the brakes immediately, but the back of the van had already caught the bottom section of the door. The panel bent inward, and part of the track popped out of the wall. I sat there frozen for a second, staring in disbelief. Then I got out to look. It wasn't destroyed, but it was bad enough that it wouldn't close properly anymore. Craig came out from the office when he heard the noise. His face went red instantly. "What the hell happened?" he shouted. I explained what I thought had gone wrong, that the door must not have been fully raised, and that I'd take responsibility. I figured it would go through insurance or get fixed like any other accident. But instead of filing a claim, Craig told me flat out, "You're paying for it." At first I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He said since I was the one who caused the damage, I'd have to cover the cost. A couple of days later, he sent me a printout from a local repair company with an estimate, $3,500. He told me he'd take $500 out of each paycheck until it was covered. I was stunned. I told him that was way too much money for me to pay out of pocket, and that this kind of damage should be covered under the company's insurance. He said, "Not if it was employee negligence." I told him that accidents happen, that it wasn't like I backed into it on purpose. But he wouldn't budge. I called the repair company myself to ask about the estimate. The lady on the phone told me they'd quoted Craig for a full door replacement. Not just a panel repair, she said, depending on the materials. It could be as low as $900 if he replaced the damaged section only. When I told Craig that, he just shrugged and said, "Too late. Already ordered." That's when I started to feel like something wasn't right. I talked to one of the senior techs, Don, who's been with the company for over 10 years. He told me Craig has a history of pulling stunts like this, charging employees for damage that mysteriously costs a lot more than it should. Apparently, a few years back, another guy clipped a curb and cracked a bumper on one of the vans, and Craig made him pay for the whole replacement instead of just repairing it through insurance. I started keeping notes, dates, what was said, everything. I even looked up labor laws in Ohio. Turns out, an employer can't just deduct money from your paycheck for damages unless you sign something agreeing to it, or it's proven that you acted with gross negligence. I never signed anything. When I brought that up to Craig, he got defensive. "You're lucky I'm not firing you," he said. "You want me to call it insubordination?" That's when I realized he was serious about going through with it. I went home that night furious and worried. My wife, Melissa, told me to contact the labor board or a lawyer. I hesitated because I didn't want to lose my job. I'm the main provider for our family. But $3,500 is a ton of money for a mistake that wasn't intentional. She said, "If he gets away with this, he'll keep doing it." So I called the Ohio Department of Commerce's Wage and Hour Division. The guy I spoke to told me what Craig was doing sounded illegal, especially if he planned to withhold money without written consent. He said to file a formal complaint if Craig took any money from my pay. The next paycheck came. Craig had taken out $500. That was the last straw. I filed the complaint, sent over my pay stub, and attached the text message where Craig confirmed the deduction for the garage repair. Within a couple of weeks, I got a call from an investigator who said they'd reached out to Craig. Apparently, he'd told them I volunteered to pay for the damage. When the investigator asked for proof, Craig didn't have any. The next morning, Craig called me into his office, livid. "You went to the state?" he said, like I'd betrayed him. I told him, "You took money out of my paycheck without permission. You left me no choice." He started going off about loyalty and responsibility, saying, "You break something, you fix it." I told him that's what insurance is for. He told me to pack up my stuff and leave. I didn't even argue. I grabbed my tools, handed over the keys, and walked out. It was scary at first, but within a week, I had 2 interviews lined up with other HVAC companies in the area. One of them, a bigger operation out of Dayton, hired me almost immediately after hearing what happened. The manager laughed and said, "That guy's been a crook for years. You're better off." A few weeks later, I got a letter from the labor board saying Craig had been ordered to reimburse me the $500 plus a fine. Apparently, they also made him provide proof of his payroll practices going forward. I can't describe how good it felt to get that check in the mail. Not just for the money, but for the principle. Melissa framed the letter from the labor board. She said, "That's the price of standing up for yourself." It's wild to me how easily some small business owners think they can take advantage of their employees, like we don't know our rights. I learned a lot from this whole mess. Mostly that taking responsibility doesn't mean letting someone manipulate you. Craig tried to guilt trip me after I left. He sent a text saying, "You'll regret making an enemy out of me." I didn't respond. The truth is, I don't regret a thing. I drive past that old shop every now and then. The garage door looks brand new, but the company's down to 3 vans instead of 6. A couple of my old coworkers told me they're all looking for new jobs. Guess word travels fast when a boss starts messing with people's paychecks. I'm in a better place now. New company, higher pay, and a boss who treats us like people instead of walking repair bills. Sometimes mistakes happen, but at least now I work somewhere that knows how to handle them like adults. Update. It's been about 3 months since I posted about my old boss trying to make me pay for that garage door. And honestly, the whole thing has taken a few unexpected turns. I didn't plan to write an update, but a few people from my old shop reached out recently, and what's happened since then feels worth sharing. After I left, Craig must have realized how much heat he'd brought on himself. The labor board fine hit him harder than he expected, from what Don told me. It wasn't just about the $500 he had to return to me. It triggered an audit of his payroll records. The investigator apparently found irregularities, meaning Craig had been skimming hours or underpaying overtime for years. Don said a couple of guys who'd been there longer got contacted by the state. 2, within a month, half the shop quit. Craig had replaced me with a kid named Tyler, fresh out of trade school. Poor guy didn't even last 2 weeks. He backed a van into a fence post at a job site, and guess what? Craig tried to make him pay for that too. The kid's dad came down to the office the next morning and tore into him. Apparently told Craig if he didn't back off, he'd call the cops for wage theft. Tyler quit on the spot, That's when the floodgates opened. Word spread around town that the Department of Commerce had been looking into Craig's business. In the HVAC world around here, reputation is everything, especially with commercial clients. Once customers started hearing about the fines and the employee exodus, a few contracts didn't renew. Dawn said 2 of their biggest accounts pulled out. And by late summer, Craig was basically running things alone with one tech and his wife helping with the phones. Meanwhile, I'd been settling into my new job in Dayton. My boss, Matt, runs things completely differently. He's strict about safety and paperwork, but he's fair. If something breaks, it gets logged and handled through the company's insurance. No questions, no finger pointing. I make a little more now than I did before, and for the first time in a long while, I actually like going to work. About a month after I started there, Matt called me into his office and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a $300 bonus check and a handwritten note. Thanks for being the kind of guy who owns up to mistakes but doesn't get pushed around. Turns out he'd read my story after someone shared it in a local Facebook group for tradesmen. I didn't even realize it had made its way around, but apparently it blew up more than I thought. Melissa joked that I'd become locally internet famous for standing up to my boss. She even printed a few of the comments from that Facebook post and taped them to the fridge. Stuff like, "Good for this guy," and "Too many employers pull this kind of crap, I'll admit." It felt good to see people backing me up. Then 2 weeks ago, I got an email from an attorney representing a few of my old coworkers. They're organizing a small claims suit against Craig for unpaid overtime and unauthorized deductions. The lawyer said since I already went through the process successfully, he wanted to know if I'd be willing to provide a statement. I agreed without hesitation. Writing that statement dredged up a lot of frustration I thought I'd left behind. Remembering how small Craig made me feel, how powerless I felt when he told me I owed him thousands for an accident that insurance could have handled. It pissed me off all over again, but it also reminded me how far I've come since then. The best part, though? The repair company that fixed the door. Yeah, the one that Craig used as justification for the $3,500 bill. Actually reached out to me through Dawn. The manager apparently read my post too, and wanted me to know something. She said Craig never paid the full amount. He'd complained about the quote. So they ended up doing a cheaper partial repair for under $1,200, which means even if I had paid him back, he would have pocketed the difference. That's when it all clicked for me. He never saw it as a learning moment or even a legitimate expense. He saw it as a chance to squeeze money out of me because he thought I wouldn't question it. Hearing that made me angry again, but it also gave me closure. It confirmed what I already suspected. That standing up for myself wasn't just the right thing to do morally. It was literally the only way to stop him from continuing that pattern. Life now feels a lot calmer. Melissa and I finally caught up on bills, and we're putting some money aside each month instead of living paycheck to paycheck. We even took a weekend trip up to Lake Erie a few weeks ago. First vacation we've had in years. Sitting by the water with her, eating diner food and not thinking about work drama. I realized how much that job had been draining me. Don texted me last week and said Craig's thinking of selling the business. Apparently, he told people he's tired of the stress. I don't think it's stress. It's karma finally catching up. I don't take any joy in watching someone's business fall apart, but I can't lie. It's satisfying knowing he's facing the consequences. He built that mess himself. If there's anything I've learned from this whole experience, it's that being scared to stand up for yourself only delays the fallout. When you let people cross a line once, they start treating that as the new normal. I used to think keeping my head down was the smart move, but now I know silence is what those kinds of bosses count on these days. When new hires at my current company ask about the craziest thing that's ever happened to me on the job, I tell them the garage door story. They always laugh at first. Then their faces drop when I tell them how my old boss reacted. One guy said, "Man, I'd have just paid him to avoid the headache," I told him. That's what Craig was counting on. Standing up for yourself isn't free. It costs time, stress, and sometimes your job. But it's cheaper than living with resentment. I don't know what'll happen with the lawsuit against Craig, but I'll keep backing those guys however I can. If my story helps them get their pay, then all the better. Melissa says she's proud of me, and honestly, for the first time in a long time, I'm proud of myself too. Update 2. It's been almost a year since the garage door mess, and life has settled into something I didn't think I'd get back when all this first went down. Peace. I've been working steady with my new company, and the whole thing with Craig finally reached a conclusion. One that feels like the full circle I needed. A few months after my last update, I was contacted again by the attorney who was handling the small claims suit for my former coworkers. Turns out it grew into something much bigger. Once the Department of Commerce and the Wage and Hour Division got involved, they found a pattern of wage deductions, unreported overtime, and even falsified mileage reimbursements. The case moved from small claims to a full labor investigation. I wasn't part of the main lawsuit since I'd already resolved my issues separately. But the attorney asked if I'd be willing to testify about Craig's general behavior and the garage door incident. I agreed. Honestly, I was nervous. I'd never set foot in a courtroom before, but I figured if my statement could help the guys still working there, or at least the ones who'd been cheated out of money, it was worth it. When the day came, it was surreal walking into that hearing room. Craig was there, sitting at the front in a wrinkled suit, looking older than I remembered. His wife sat beside him, flipping through a folder of papers. He wouldn't look at me, but I caught his reflection in the window. Jaw tight, eyes cold. The attorney for the state asked me to recount what happened. I told them everything the morning I backed into the door. The estimate, the $500 deduction, the phone call to the labor board, all of it. I kept it factual and calm. The investigator nodded a few times like he'd already heard worse. When Craig's attorney cross-examined me, he tried to twist it like I'd been careless and caused significant financial damage. I said, "Accidents happen, but that's why companies carry insurance. Employees aren't personal ATMs." A few people in the room actually chuckled quietly at that. Even the judge smirked. When it was all over, I walked out of there shaking with adrenaline. It wasn't anger, though. It was relief. For so long, I'd carried this knot of frustration in my chest, and saying it out loud in a room where it actually mattered untied it. A few weeks later, I got a call from Dawn. The state had ruled against Craig. He was fined heavily, somewhere in the ballpark of $30,000, for labor violations and ordered to repay multiple employees for unpaid wages and unauthorized deductions. The business license was suspended pending compliance review. In short, he couldn't operate legally until he fixed everything. From what Dawn said, Craig tried to keep the shop open a little longer, taking cash jobs and cutting corners, but it didn't last. He lost his main supplier account, and by winter, the company shut down. I should probably feel more vindictive than I do, but honestly, I just felt done. Melissa and I went out to dinner that night after hearing the news. She raised her glass and said, "To closure," and that word hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't about revenge. It was about finally being able to close that chapter without looking back. These days, I'm managing a small crew under Matt at my new company. He's been talking about grooming me for a foreman position, which means more responsibility and a bump in pay. I never thought I'd end up leading anyone, especially after feeling so powerless last year. But I guess standing up for yourself changes something inside you. You start walking taller without realizing it. Funny enough, I ran into one of Craig's old customers a few weeks ago while working a service call. He recognized me and said, "Hey, didn't you used to work for that guy in Brookwood?" I said yeah, and he laughed. "Figures. Heard he finally got shut down. Always seemed like a snake." I didn't disagree. Melissa's been encouraging me to take some night classes in business management. She says I've got a knack for leadership, and she might be right. I've started thinking seriously about opening my own small shop someday. A place where guys like me don't have to worry about getting screwed over. If I do, the first rule will be simple. Accidents are teachable moments, not billable offenses. Sometimes I still think about that morning in the garage. The sickening crunch, Craig's voice barking orders, the dread that followed. It feels like a lifetime ago. If I could go back and talk to the version of myself standing there, terrified about losing his job, I'd tell him this. Don't let fear make you small, because that's what Craig counted on. That's what every manipulative boss counts on. That you'll keep your head down and take whatever they dish out because you're scared of losing your livelihood. But the truth is, you lose a little more of yourself every time you stay quiet. Dawn and a few of the other guys have since landed on their feet. Two of them actually joined our company. When they walked in for orientation, we all laughed and said, "Guess we're putting the band back together." It felt like coming full circle. Melissa framed the newspaper clipping about Craig's business closing right next to the labor board letter from before. Not out of spite. She said it's a reminder of how far we've come. I used to think my life had been derailed by that one accident, but now I see it differently. It wasn't the end of something. It was the start of a much better chapter. So yeah, that's where things stand. Craig's gone, the shop's closed, my family's steady, And I've got plans that actually feel possible now. Sometimes the universe has a strange way of making things right. Final update. It's been almost 2 full years since the whole ordeal with Craig and the garage door. And if you had told me back then how much would change because of one stupid accident, I wouldn't have believed you. What started as one of the worst days of my life ended up being the event that completely reset how I think about work, people, and myself after the last court ruling. I thought that was the end of it. Craig's company shut down, the fines came through, and everyone scattered to find new work. I got promoted at my new company. We bought a used truck for me to take to jobs, and Melissa and I were just living quietly again. But last spring, I got an email from a reporter for a local business magazine who'd seen the case summary from the labor board and wanted to interview me for a story on employee rights in small trades. At first, I didn't want to do it. I didn't need the attention, and I figured the story was done. But Melissa said, "You've got nothing to hide, and if it helps somebody else not get pushed around, it's worth it." She was right. So I agreed. The reporter, a guy named Luke, met me at a diner near my job site. He was laid back, around my age, and said he wanted to highlight how often small employers break labor laws simply because workers don't know their rights. We talked for an hour over coffee. I told him everything. But this time I wasn't angry anymore, just honest. He asked if I thought Craig was a bad person or just a bad boss. I said, both, but mostly a man who thought he'd never get caught. When the story came out, it blew up online again. The headline was something like, "The garage door that brought down a boss. One worker's fight for fairness." It was weird seeing my name in print, but the comments were all supportive. A few other tradespeople even reached out through Facebook, saying they'd been through similar stuff. Deductions for tools, damage fees, missing overtime. One guy told me he used my story as evidence when he filed his own complaint. That part hit me. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about impact. Matt, my boss, saw the article and called me into his office. I thought maybe he was annoyed, but he grinned and said, "You know you're our unofficial HR rep now, right?" He wasn't wrong. Guys started coming to me when they had questions about pay or safety procedures. I didn't mind. It felt good to be trusted. Then about 6 months ago, something I never expected happened. Craig reached out to me. I got an email out of nowhere with the subject line, "Apology." My stomach sank when I saw his name, but curiosity got the better of me. The message was short. He said he'd lost almost everything, his business, his savings, most of his professional reputation. He wrote that he'd been going through a divorce and financial trouble even before all of it, and that my case pushed him over the edge. Then he said something that stuck with me. "I blamed you because you were the only one still standing when everything around me was falling apart." He didn't ask for forgiveness outright, but he did say he was sorry for taking it out on me. Said he'd been working part-time for another HVAC company. Trying to rebuild, I didn't respond for a few days. I kept rereading it, feeling torn between empathy and anger. On one hand, I didn't owe him anything. On the other, holding on to hate wasn't doing me any favors either. Eventually, I replied with a short message. "I appreciate the apology. I hope you've learned something from all this." I have too, that was it. No hard feelings, no invitation to reconnect. Just closure. A few weeks later, Don told me he ran into Craig at a supply warehouse. Said the guy looked humbled, quieter, older. He told Don he'd read the article and was embarrassed but also grateful it made him realize how wrong he'd been. I'm not sure how much of that is true, but honestly, I don't need proof. Just knowing he's not out there pulling the same stuff on someone else is enough. Meanwhile, life kept moving forward for me. I got promoted officially to crew supervisor in April. Now I manage a team of 6 techs and handle scheduling, training, and job safety. Matt says he trusts my judgment completely, which is funny considering how unsure of myself I used to be. I still turn a wrench when things get busy, but most days I'm mentoring the new guys, teaching them the ropes, checking in on how they're doing, making sure nobody feels taken advantage of. Melissa says I've turned into the boss I used to wish I had. That's about the best compliment anyone's ever given me. Last month, we bought a small house outside town. A fixer-upper with an old detached garage that needs a new door. When we moved in, Melissa laughed and said, "Full circle, huh?" I told her I'd never touch a garage door opener again, at least not without checking twice. The funny thing is, every time I look at that garage, I don't think about the accident anymore. I think about how that moment forced me to grow up in a way I probably wouldn't have otherwise. It taught me what integrity really costs and how standing up for yourself can change more than just your job. It changes the way you see your own worth. I've even started keeping a small blog where I share stories about working in trades, mostly for younger guys just starting out. Stuff I wish someone had told me when I was 20 and scared to speak up. Nothing fancy, just real talk about dealing with bosses, clients, and burnout. A few posts have gotten traction, and one of the editors from the same magazine asked if I'd consider writing a longer piece next year. Melissa says I should. I'm thinking about it every now and then. I'll still get a message from a stranger saying something like, "Hey, I read your story. It gave me the push to call out my boss." And that's when it hits me how wild this all is. One split-second mistake with a van, a bent piece of metal, and a guy with an ego ended up setting off a chain reaction that made me the kind of person I didn't even know I could be. If there's a moral to all this, it's that sometimes the thing that breaks your routine is exactly what you need to start building something better. The garage door, the lawsuit, the apology. It's all behind me now. Life's good, work's solid, and home feels like home again. I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful. Stories number 10. My partner crossed a line I never knew I had to draw. I, 34F, have a daughter, Chloe, who is 12. Her dad and I split up when she was a baby, and it's mostly been just the two of us against the world. About a year and a half ago, I started seeing a wonderful man. Mark, 36M, he's kind, funny, has a stable job, and he's been great with Chloe. He doesn't try to be her dad, but he's a solid, friendly adult presence in her life. We recently moved in together, and for the most part, it's been a smooth transition. This weekend, everything blew up. Chloe was at a weekend-long science camp. Mark and I were enjoying the rare quiet, doing some cleaning around the house. I was tackling the kitchen, and he said he'd do a general tidy-up after a while. I noticed he was taking a long time in Chloe's room. I didn't think much of it until I walked past and saw him. He wasn't just tidying. He had one of Chloe's top drawers open, and he was holding her private journal. My heart just dropped into my stomach. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice coming out quiet and tight. He looked up. Not even guilty, just matter of fact. "Oh, hey, I'm just doing a deep clean. I figured since she's gone, it was a good time to really get in there. You wouldn't believe the dust under the bed." I stared at him, my eyes flicking from the open drawer to the journal in his hand. "Mark, that's her journal, and that's her underwear drawer." He finally seemed to register my tone. He put the journal down, but still looked confused by my reaction. "I know, I was just straightening things up." The drawer was a mess, and the journal was just on the nightstand. I was going to put it back. "It wasn't on the nightstand," I said, my voice starting to shake. "She keeps it hidden in that drawer, under her clothes." "Because it's private," he shrugged. Still not getting it. I was just trying to help. "She's a kid. What does she have to hide? I'm part of this family now, aren't I? I'm just looking out for her." That's when I saw red. "Get out," I said, my voice low and venomous. "What?" "Get out of her room. Right now. Don't you ever go through her things again. Her room is off limits. Her drawers are off limits. Her journal is a line you do not cross. Do you understand me?" He looked utterly shocked, like I'd just slapped him. "Whoa, calm down. I was just cleaning. You're acting like I'm some kind of predator." "I'm acting like you violated my daughter's privacy." I was full-on yelling now. She is 12. This is the age where she needs to know her space. Her thoughts, her body, are her own. She needs to feel safe in her own room. And you just treated it like public domain because you had a dust rag in your hand. The fight escalated from there. He accused me of overreacting, of not treating him like a true partner, of being irrational. He said if he was going to be a parental figure, he needed to be able to act like one, which included knowing what was going on in her life. I screamed back that a real parental figure earns trust. They don't rifle through underwear drawers to find it. I told him he had shattered any trust Chloe had in him, and that I didn't know if I could ever look at him the same way. He's been staying at a friend's place for the last 2 days. We've exchanged a few terse texts. He still thinks I blew things out of proportion. He says he was motivated by care, and that my reaction was disproportionate and hostile. Now, in the quiet, I'm wrestling with so much guilt and anger. I am furious at him for his breathtaking lack of boundaries. But I'm also feeling a sickening sense of failure as a mom. I should have laid down ground rules about her privacy the day he moved in. I assumed it was common sense. I was wrong. Chloe comes home from camp tomorrow. Do I tell her what happened? The thought of her finding out that her private space was invaded makes me feel physically ill. It would devastate her and make her feel unsafe in her own home. But keeping it a secret feels like a betrayal, too. I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff. Part of me feels completely justified in my fury. My number one job is to protect my daughter, and I failed. But another part is wondering if I did overreact. Was it just an innocent, if stupid, mistake? Did I just nuke my relationship over a well-intentioned, albeit clueless, cleaning spree? The silence in the house is deafening, and I don't know what to do. Update. The 2 days after our fight were the longest of my life. The silence in the house was a physical weight. Every time I passed Chloe's door, my stomach would clench. I felt like I had failed her twice. First, by not protecting her space, and second, by creating a home where such a violation could even be a topic of debate. Mark and I exchanged a few more texts, but they were just logistical. I'm staying at Greg's. Okay. The real conversation was looming, and I dreaded it. I spent those days swinging between white-hot rage and a deep, nauseating uncertainty. Was I protecting my daughter, or was I, as he said, being disproportionate? The night before Chloe was due home, I couldn't sleep. I went into her room and just sat on her bed. I looked at the neatly made comforter, the stack of books on her nightstand, the drawer that had started it all. This was her sanctuary, and I had let someone treat it like a common area. That's when the last of my doubt evaporated. My initial reaction wasn't wrong. The core of my anger was justified. A line had been crossed, and my job was to make sure it was never crossed again. Mark came over the next morning. Before Chloe was due back, he looked tired. We sat at the kitchen table, the scene of so many happy breakfasts, now feeling like a negotiation table. I still think you yelled at me like I was a monster, he started, his voice low. I was just trying to help, to be part of the family. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady and calm. Mark, listen to me. This isn't about your intentions. I believe you thought you were helping. But this is about the impact of your actions, not your intent. The impact is that you violated my daughter's privacy in the most profound way. Her bedroom, her drawers, her journal, that is her sovereign territory. It is not a family space to be cleaned by anyone but her or, on rare occasion, me. I could see him starting to get defensive again, so I pressed on. This isn't about you not being family. This is about her being a 12-year-old girl. She is at the age where her sense of self is fragile. She needs to know, without a shadow of a doubt, that her body, her thoughts, and her space are her own. By going through her things, you sent a message, whether you meant to or not, that her boundaries don't matter, that an adult's curiosity or desire to clean trumps her right to privacy. I will never, ever allow that. He was quiet for a long time, just staring at his hands. I didn't see it that way, he finally said, his voice softer. I was thinking like a manager, a problem solver. The room was messy, so I fixed it. I wasn't thinking about it as her. That's the problem, I said, my own voice cracking with emotion. You have to think about it as her, always. Being a parental figure isn't about control or access. It's about stewardship. It's about guiding and protecting, even protecting her from us when we overstep. I then told him my decision. I am not going to tell Chloe what you did. Telling her would shatter her sense of security in this house, and that would only punish her for your mistake. But here is what is going to happen. Her room is permanently off limits to you for any reason. You do not go in there to clean, to get something, to open a window, nothing. If her door is closed, you knock and wait for permission to enter. Even if she's not home, that is her space, and you have lost the privilege of entering it indefinitely. I expected an argument, a fight about how unfair that was, but he just nodded slowly. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I can do that. And we are going to family therapy, I continued. We need a neutral third party to help us navigate what being a family actually means in this new context. Because right now, we have very different definitions. He agreed to that. 2. The hardest part was still to come. Chloe came home a few hours later, buzzing with excitement from camp. She gave me a huge hug and gave Mark a cheerful, "Hey, Mark!" She was completely oblivious. My heart ached with a mixture of relief and guilt. Later that evening, I sat down with her in her room. I told her I needed to talk to her about privacy. I said, "Your room is your space, always from now on. Even I will not go into your drawers or touch your journal without your explicit permission. And that goes for everyone else too. Your door being closed means you need privacy, and that will always be respected. No questions asked." She looked at me, a little confused but pleased. "Okay, Mom, thanks. It was a new rule." And she accepted it without understanding the fire it was forged in. It's been a month now. Mark has been the new boundaries. He knocks on her door every single time. He doesn't even hover in the doorway. We've had 2 sessions with a family therapist, and it's been painful but illuminating. Mark has begun to understand that his own upbringing, where privacy was minimal and cleaning was often a pretext for inspection, shaped his actions. He's apologized to me, a real, heartfelt apology where he acknowledged the damage his actions could have caused and thanked me for not telling Chloe. Things aren't perfect. There's a new carefulness between us all. The easy, unthinking trust is gone, and I don't know if it will ever fully return, but it's being replaced by something more deliberate, more conscious. We're building a new structure, with clearer, stronger walls. My daughter is safe, her sanctuary is intact, and I finally feel like I've done my job. It cost me a piece of my relationship, but protecting her was a price I was always willing to pay. Final update. It's been 6 months since the incident in my daughter's room, and I feel like I can finally close this chapter for good. The path from that explosive fight to where we are now wasn't a straight line. It was more like a long, winding road with a few potholes we had to navigate carefully. The family therapy sessions were the real turning point. Our therapist, Linda, had a gentle but firm way of pulling things to the surface. In our 3rd session, she had Mark and I do an exercise where we weren't allowed to use the words you or I, only we. It was agonizingly difficult at first. We feel that privacy was violated, I started, the sentence feeling clunky and foreign. We feel that the reaction was very strong, Mark countered, just as awkwardly, but as we kept going, forced to frame everything as a shared problem. Something shifted. We weren't Mark versus Sarah anymore. We were we, a unit trying to solve a breakdown in our family system. Linda helped Mark articulate something he hadn't been able to before, that his actions came from a place of deep-seated anxiety. He felt like an outsider in our well-established mother-daughter dyad, and he thought that by managing the household, including Chloe's space, he could prove his worth and solidify his place. He wasn't trying to be controlling, he was trying to belong. Hearing that broke my heart in a new way. The anger I'd been clinging to began to loosen its grip. For me, Linda helped me see that my fierce, almost feral reaction wasn't just about the drawer. It was about the fear every single mother has when she lets a new person into her child's life. It was the terror that I had made a mistake, that my judgment in a partner was flawed, and that my child would pay the price. My explosion was the sound of every protective instinct I possessed firing at once. With this new understanding, the real healing began. Mark didn't just follow the rules about Chloe's room. He embraced their spirit. He started asking her for permission for things he never would have thought of before. Chloe, is it okay if I put this package on your desk? Do you mind if I open your window to air out the hallway? At first, she was confused by the formality. But slowly, I watched her stand a little taller. She was being treated with a respect she'd never consciously asked for, but clearly needed. Their relationship began to rebuild on this new foundation of earned trust. He started helping her with her math homework, at the kitchen table, never in her room, and discovered he was a surprisingly patient tutor. He'd ask about her friends and her books, showing a genuine interest in her world without prying. It was no longer about him forcing his way in. It was about him being invited. The biggest test came about 3 months ago. Chloe's school had a father-daughter dance. Her own dad, who lives across the country, had flaked on, promising to visit for it. She was heartbroken that evening. She was quiet at dinner, pushing her food around her plate. Finally, she looked up at Mark, her eyes a little shy. Mark? She asked quietly. The dance at my school. Would you maybe want to go with me? I saw Mark's eyes well up instantly. He cleared his throat, his voice thick with emotion. Chloe, I would be honored, absolutely. He took her shopping for a new dress, not as an adult dictating choices, but as a supportive companion holding her purse and giving a thumbs up or down from outside the dressing room. The night of the dance, he bought her a corsage, held the car door open for her, and took about 100 pictures. When they came home, her face was glowing, and she couldn't stop talking about what a great dancer he was. That night, I knew we were going to be okay. He hadn't tried to replace her dad. He had simply shown up as Mark. And that was exactly what she needed. Our relationship has deepened in a way I didn't expect. The crisis forced us to communicate on a level we'd been avoiding. We don't make assumptions anymore. We talk about everything, from finances to parenting philosophies, with a new honesty and vulnerability. The easy pre-crisis bliss is gone, but it's been replaced by something sturdier, more resilient. We've seen each other at our worst and chosen to stay and build something better. As for Chloe, her room remains her castle. Her journal is still tucked safely away, but now sometimes she leaves her door open.